Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. We are here with my amazing co-host, Margi DeLynn. Hey, Margi.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. It's always great to have you.
Thank you.
We are here right in the middle of a two-part episode with Chris and Mitch. We are basically, if you haven't heard part one of our interview with Chris and Mitch, it was really valuable. They basically talked about their respective Mormon upbringings, being raised outside of Utah, Chris in California and Mitch in Virginia, but how they eventually went to college in Utah, Chris to Snow College in Ephraim, and Mitch to BYU Idaho in Rexburg, Idaho, and eventually how they went and served missions. Chris don't tell me. Chris in Boston, Massachusetts, and Mitch in Ukraine. And the focus of part one was their stories, but also on how difficult missions can be. And, Chris shared about an early return from his mission after serving 2 months and how depressed and anxious he got. And Mitch completed his 2-year mission, but talked about suicidal ideation due to, purity culture kind of pressure and guilt and shame. So it was a really important interview. It's worth watching. Go back and watch if you can. It'll give you context for today, for this next part. But in part two, now we're going to be covering their kind of post-mission life, but with an emphasis on them as brothers-in-law. And so, obviously Chris is going to talk about a little bit of his post-mission life, getting married, and his faith journey, where he starts to question or have doubts about the church. And then that's going to dovetail into Mitch's story, where at some point he's got Chris as a brother-in-law and who's maybe gone through some of his faith journey. And then Mitch has his own faith journey, and how they found out about each other, how they communicated with each other, how they supported each other, and then how they have dealt with extending believing family and their own spouses. And that's kind of what this part two is going to be about. So how does that sound, Chris? Should we just dive into what aspects of your post-mission life sort of weave with your faith journey?
Yeah, so I went back to Snow. Had actually a great year, and finished that out, and I transferred to USU. There's actually a little bit of a blip where I went to BYU for like a month, and it was just not a good fit. And the anxiety and depression flared a little bit again, and so I dropped out. It was like the last day I could. I was like, I should probably get out here now before it ruins my GPA. So I kind of wondered, is this something that I'm going to have to deal with anytime like something new comes up? And am I going to run from it like every single time? And so it actually was it just made me worried. Can I get married? Like, how am I going to deal with this? But let's keep escaping from our anxiety and depression, and not knowing if it's a solution or if I'm just escaping it, and let's keep going. So I transferred to USU, and the quick version of all this is I was majoring in history, was taking English history classes, and had amazing roommates, still friends with all of them now. This would have been in about 04, 05 when I was at USU for my junior and senior years. And I was extremely active in the student wards. I was Sunday school teacher. I loved it. I remember even at one point, it was like, I think it was a summer, and I said, I was teaching a lesson, and I'm like, I think we have ice cream left over from an activity. Should we go grab the ice cream and just go outside? And I remember like, everyone's like, yeah. And then everyone leaves, and it's like the one high counselor is just kind of like, mm-mm. I'm like, we're probably going to do it anyway. So we did, and it was awesome.
Maybe you'd gained a little bit of independence, spiritual independence after your mission.
Yeah. And I guess kind of continuing that theme, right? And this was mostly, I think, unconscious, and I didn't realize how unhealthy this was at the time, but it was kind of project overcompensate, or at the time I probably would have viewed it as project reached the level of spirituality that you should be at because you didn't complete your mission. So I'm on that plan, and I was getting up really early, and I'm taking a full load of credits. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to study the scriptures. This is like, I'm diving into like deep nibbly stuff and temple stuff. And, it's just all kinds of, the deeper fun doctrines, McConkie, what's it? The Second Comforter.
Ooh,
what's the
Deborah Snuffer stuff?
Really?
Second Anointing.
Yeah. So it's like, this is all from Joseph Smith. This is all from McConkie. This is awesome.
So basically learning about how you can become so righteous that you can see Jesus in your lifetime and get what's called the Second Comforter or the Second Witness.
Yes.
Where you know for a surety that Jesus lives
and that's a fun thing.
He hangs out with you.
Right. At the time. And this is, separate from the ordinance that maybe this will come up later, but, and it was like, this is the purest form. I'm reading Joseph Fielding Smith and Doctrines of Salvation, and I'm skipping some of the weird stuff that I don't think aged well, but there's a lot of good stuff in here, and Mormonism has all the answers, and it was great. It was sort of like the renaissance of my testimony. And I thought maybe I can rebuild the damage I did on the mission. I can earn this, temple attendance. For a while I was going once a week to the temple, and I was walking there, and I would see people and I'm like, you're the guy that walks to the temple all the time. And I was doing all those things, and I was going on dates, and I thought, it looks like I can maybe get through this, and there are these things that would happen every once in a while that would pull you back, right? And I remember there was a time I was meeting with some girls I knew in my ward in their apartment, and I don't know how this came up, but they were talking about, could you marry someone who didn't return from their mission, like didn't complete their mission? And they didn't know. It's not like I went around broadcasting this. And it was like they were genuinely trying to work through this in their mind. Like, it was a tough decision. And they were like, I don't know, maybe, like, I don't think I could. And I'm just like, they don't know. Don't say anything. It's fine. But it reminded you, it hurts. And you have to deal with that like, okay, you're trying, but deep down, that like you screwed this up, and you're always going to be defined by this thing that you were supposed to do that you didn't do. And of course, it doesn't help that you are in this culture of, like Mitch, you mentioned this, like stand up if you've experienced this. And that was always the thing, like stand up if you went on a mission. And I'm like, do I stand up or not? Because if I do, then I'm like starting this lie, this web of deceit for like all these relationships I'm about to make in my ward. But if I sit there, then I close everything off. So like, it just depended. Sometimes I'd be like, all right, I'll just sort of stand up at this point. I think sometimes I felt like I was shut out of certain callings with certain bishops. Most of my bishops were actually really awesome about all of this, but, I didn't really talk about it. But things would come up that would remind me, you're still not to this point, right? Maybe there's hope, maybe not. And so, but for the most part, I had a really good experience at USU as an undergrad finishing my degree.
I have to just say that there's this dynamic in, let's just say, high demand religions and maybe Mormonism sometimes, where if you follow the formula and it works, well, then the church gets all the credit, and you have maybe a good experience, and so you remain super faithful. And if you don't follow the formula, or you follow the formula and it doesn't work out for you, it's your fault. And then you're even committed more so because you have to hustle for worthiness. You have to atone, in your case, for early
hustle,
mission
that's a good
return.
word for it.
And either way, you're hustling for the church. Either way, the church, the house wins. There's this idea of house always wins. Like, if you have a good experience, you're more committed to the church. And if you have a bad experience, you're even more committed to the church, and the church kind of wins either way.
I mean, it's like a flow chart. Like, there's no path that leads to, like, maybe it's not true.
Maybe it's the
like,
church.
That's not on there.
Maybe
right?
the church is the problem.
Yeah, it's not on that flow chart.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, like, I was absolutely genuine about all of this. I wasn't like suffering through endowment ceremonies. Like, okay, I got to do what I got to do to like get to back to where I need to be. I enjoyed all this. I was in. I mean, my motivation, I think, was genuine. I had really good roommates. You know, we would like, oh, one of my roommates would be elders quorum president, and we would just have a really good time. And I think I also thought that I walked a really interesting line where, you know, there was actually one point we lived in a house. There was 7 of us crammed in this house, kind of by the D Event Center, just right across the street in USU. And our bishop was like, "Can we have you guys like host some sort of like parties or like unofficial from the church, but because we can't like officially fund it or anything, and we don't want to, but people seem to be comfortable with you guys because you're active, but you're not tightwads about it, right? Like you have a sense of humor. Like I gotten it back, and you know, like you're fun, and you know, we all we are all like really good friends, and we found this house together. And I liked that sort of space where I was all in. I believed, you know, I was doing all these things to try to compete or to make up to the deficit of the mission experience. And it was just a amazing time. I loved college. I loved it. Again, still have friends.
Freaking Aggies. Go Aggies, right?
And this was like J.C. Carroll. Basketball.
Yeah, I was there. I was there.
I know some stuff.
So Margi and I were there from 2004 to 2017.
Yep.
So those were great years.
We overlapped. And it was the time where we were, this was what it was like to be an Aggie at the time, where you go to the basketball games and then you go to an institute and get chewed out for just being mercilessly ruthless to the opposing team.
There's nothing like it. I mean, there's
crazy.
probably worse basketball fans out there in the United States, but Aggie basketball fans bring it, right?
Yeah. And you're proud of it. Like you'd be in the institute and you're like, come on. Like we love that we do this. I mean, there was a time when someone had done like research on an opposing player who had like been in jail at one point, and every time he touched the ball, the entire crowd would just start yelling like jailbird or something.
Yeah,
like
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah,
you were there?
yeah.
We shared that moment. That's fun. Yeah. And you get into it, right? And so it was a great time.
Like when the opposing team's like shooting a free throw or something, they all turn their backs on the right.
It was bad.
What was the student section called? What, Margi?
There were times when that was
Rowdy
so
crowd?
uncomfortable to be in that crowd.
You're like, oh, this is
I'm
too
like,
far
wow,
for me.
wow, this is next level.
Like maybe let's
remember?
not like pick on someone's like dying mom. Like maybe let's back off of that. But
what did they do when the game was ending and it was pretty much decided that they were winning? Do you remember?
No. Did we do something crazy?
Okay. I don't know if they sang na 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 goodbye or I don't know. What
Yeah,
it was,
probably. And I remember there was actually a time where my roommate and I got called out to do the halftime show, and we had little tricycles and we were racing. And it was like $50 for whoever won, and I think I won. It's like this little tiny thing. Anyway, I totally forgot about that. But we don't need to talk about football. Let's not talk about that.
That was basketball. Oh, football?
It was a bad time for Aggie football. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was like one game they won. It was like a field goal. Anyway, so I loved it. I loved USU. So it was a really good place for me to have, you know, active LDS friends and you know, going on dates with all these people, and but not to the point where it was, I don't know, cliche, but like kind of the BYU kind of thing, right? And I took pride in that. And we're doing Mormonism like our cool way, and I'd have conversations with roommates 3 a.m. about just like, you know, deep LDS theology, and it was just a self-growth and learning, and it was, I still enjoy it. I look back on that and I'm like, man, what a waste. I should have been snorting coke off of strippers while I was in college. So I still really loved the time that I had there. And so I'll sort of move to, and that sort of continued. You know, I was super active in the church. I had amazing bishops that I still keep in contact with, that I feel are mentors. So I graduate, and because of the mission, I was 2 years ahead of everybody. And so I graduate alone, and then I decide, well, what am I going to do? I'm not married, so I should probably stay, and I'll go to grad school. So I decided to do an English master's in American Studies. It was an English degree. And maybe I'll try to teach as well, because it seems kind of fun, and grad students teach these intro classes. And so I transitioned into grad school, and I'm still living with my undergrad roommates, and I'm loving graduate school. It's kicking the crap out of me initially.
Still at USU?
What's that?
Still at USU?
Yeah. So I stayed at USU, and I was like, oh yeah, this is hard. I thought I was good at school, but so it took a little bit of time to get used to it. And so this would have been probably 2007, and I was thinking about what am I going to do for my thesis. And I had written a paper about excommunication in the church and something about spiritual violence, and I was really interested in it. And all my instructors were thinking, hey, I don't know if anyone's really done this in the way you're talking about it. So maybe do an interdisciplinary thing where you're looking up historical records and you're kind of tracing this this procedure, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And so I started doing research in the special collections at USU Library. So I'm in the basement, I have these gloves on, I'm like looking through these old documents. And I started looking through disciplinary council like minutes, right? And I can't remember kind of what the limits are, but if it's a certain point back, you can't access these things, but at some point they're like public access. I can't remember is it public domain? I don't know what the law that applies there, but so I'm reading these disciplinary council like hearings, I guess, and just down there by myself, like I'm like a historian out here looking at this cool stuff, and I'm just seeing things I've never seen before, right? And so,
can I just say there's a huge, cool story about Mormon historian Leonard Arrington. Mm-hmm. Were you about to tell that?
No.
Okay.
Go
Who was church historian, called the first kind of academic qualified historian to serve as church historian, who served from 72 to 82. Nowadays, the church only calls lawyers as church historians, but he was actually a credible, well-respected historian. He was obviously, that administration was shut down. The church closed it down because the truthful history in the 70s and 80s was making Boyd K. Packer and others really uncomfortable. When Leonard Arrington was getting old and was ready to die, he needed a place to give his records. Mm-hmm. And the church wanted his records because he knew where a lot of the bodies were buried, so to speak. And there was a tussle between the Mormon Church and Utah State University about who would get Leonard Arrington's records.
Yeah.
And ultimately there was some negotiation and the church got a few things, but ultimately Leonard Arrington's records got to go to Utah State in the Leonard Arrington, special collections or whatever it's called. So it's really a cool archive for that and for many other reasons.
I haven't read Prince's book, but was he using the
he
archives
primarily used a diary of David O. McKay's secretary, but I'm sure he spent a lot of time in the USU archives as well.
Because he did the Arrington biography too, I think.
Yeah, he did both the David O. McKay biography and a Leonard Arrington biography.
Well,
he was at USU a lot.
You mentioned Arrington. I was in a class where we read Great Basin Kingdom, which was a great book, and that was
his breakout book.
Yeah, here's how historians do their thing. Like, let's read it, and then you go do your thing. So I was like loving being down there looking at all these documents. And then I read one, and someone had been excommunicated for apostasy was probably the reason, but it went further and it mentioned Adam God. And I was like, what is that? So I keep reading and I'm like fascinated by this. And, Brigham Young comes up, and it's my first introduction to that term. And it interested me. So there wasn't much I was able to get out of the document, but I just start researching, and again, this is about 07, maybe 08. And
tell our listeners what Adam God just in 20 seconds.
So
what is Adam God
Brigham Young had taught, and you guys help me out too, you're gonna know more than me probably, but that Adam was God, right? And
so Adam from Adam and Eve,
right,
was God the Father,
right? And
Jesus is dad, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I thought, at the time I had thought that's weird. I've never heard of that, but it's not, it's not some big punch in the face. Like, okay, Brigham Young said some stuff, and, I kind of look more into it. And at the time I was okay with, let's see what the church says about this. And it was pretty clear cut. This is something that was wrong. Brigham Young kind of mentioned it, but I'm paraphrasing, but he opined, he was a man, like, it's fine. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it just interested me. And so I started learning things throughout the history. Now, at the time, did I follow up enough to realize this was part of the St. George Temple ceremony? if I'm correct on that. And this is like part of what was going on in the Veil. Like it wasn't just, he had a thought once that just escaped when he was giving a talk one time. Right. But at the time that was like enough for me to be like, oh, cool. I'll get past it. Right. And more of that stuff kind of kept popping up where it would be someone who was excommunicated for apostasy, for espousing some kind of theory or some kind of doctrine. And that's the one that sticks out to me the most. There were probably some other ones, but what it did is it started to light a fire of, I like this. This is fun. And I wonder actually if it connected, I've never thought about this now, but if somehow finding exclusive, secretive, cool, cobwebby Mormon doctrine in the special collections with my little gloves on, by myself, maybe fed that Mormon overcompensation thing from the mission. It's fun to psychoanalyze myself like live here, but it did the opposite of what it does to a lot of people, where they have these shelf breaks and it's loaded up and it collapses with all the weight. I loved it and I ate it up and I looked for more of it. In fact, I remember there was a time I was checking out a bunch of books from the library to do this research. And it was like, is it Mormonism Unveiled? Is that Edie Howe? Is that the name? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember. Mm-hmm. A bunch of books. There was Hurlbut, the one that collected all the affidavits. I mean, all this stuff. And I'm like, I dump it on the checkout, area. And it's someone that I like go to church with in my ward. And I'm like teaching Sunday school. And they're like, boop, checking all the books out. And they're like kind of looking at me, is everything cool? I'm like, yeah. Because they see all these books, Brody's in there and all this. And I'm like really excited about it. And so I started reading a lot of these histories, things from like discourses. I didn't dive too deep there. And it just fed this, I don't know, maybe this sort of sense of narcissism. Like I know more than other people. And this'll get me to where I need to be. So I was fascinated and I didn't find it really threatening at all. Maybe subconsciously I was like suppressing things, but, and it was still fairly safe where I was not really going outside to critical things necessarily. Not
to psychoanalyze you, but I can relate to it because I had a really bad mission experience too. And I got sent home early and got reassigned and it was very traumatic for me. And I was never the same after that. But once you learn about where the bodies are buried and you learn about the dark, seedy things in church history, mm-hmm. Not only do you feel like you kind of know more than the average member, so it's almost a way of kind of one-upping yourself relative to the quote righteous or faithful members. Mm-hmm. It's almost a way of compensating for your feelings of inadequacy. And to feel like you got something on them. And maybe it's a way to normalize, well, if you had mistakes or if you had problems, well, so did Brigham Young. Mm-hmm. So did the others. And so I don't know. I felt those things. Yeah,
you're exactly right. And I like that you added that last part because it actually made problems like imperfect people in the scriptures more three-dimensional. I was like, oh, I actually like this. So like my favorite part of Nephi is when he's like the psalm, right? Like I think that's the way we refer to it because it's kind of, he's sort of normal. Now true, like the stuff that he's, psalming about, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm worse than you, but it made it kind of more real. And I even remember like at one point interpreting Nephi beheading Laban. That came up in conference, I think, just recently. I think Renlund talked about it. But I thought, wait, no, look, if you read it closely, I studied literature and history, and so I loved like analyzing scriptures in that way. He doesn't want to do it, right? He's like, I don't want to. And he's like, but he like gives a justification God. It's like utilitarian philosophy. Like, I need you to do it because of this. And he's like, okay. And he pushes back. And so it made it real, right? These are real people, right? And so it fed this sort of intellectual blossoming of Mormon studies, right? And I felt like I was getting like the pure stuff from the historical record. And so that led me to Bushman. Rough Stone Rolling. And my dad actually recommended that book. He's like, I think are going to like this. And he's like, there's some stuff in here that bothers people. And so he sort of fed that like wink, wink, like you're in this club when you read this stuff. And keep in mind, so there was nothing about Joseph Smith's polygamy in my experience. I didn't hear a word about it growing up. This was not, and maybe this is just my experience, but all through my undergrad, halfway through my graduate degree, this just did not come up. And so it was an introduction to me, to Joseph Smith's polygamy and all the other stuff. I mean, Bushman talks about Kinderhook plates and,
treasure digging stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in there and a great book. I mean, I should reread it. I think it's a good historical record of all that, but it's just enough to fit what I needed at the time, right? Where I want to do him credit. I don't want to say that he's given him a pass a little bit, but I think there definitely is a little more of a faith promoting sort of spin on a lot of it, right? Especially, he highlights more, if I remember right, the sealing stuff. It's more about sealing and connecting families, and like there might have been a little confusion initially, right? And that's how you can kind of get over a lot of the trouble. And so I don't know if I'd call it a work of apologetics. I'm not sure if that's an accurate label, but it worked for me because it was just enough at the spot where it's getting into some of the stuff that no one knows, but like it's still cool. It's still fine. It's still true.
Still faithful.
Yeah. And so I loved that book. That made me, I think, confident to be looking at other things that might have been troubling. And so I was actually at I guess he was my fiance at the time. I was watching, it was like Craig Ferguson. Remember that guy, the talk show host? And he had like Bill Maher on and they were talking about DNA, right? And they bring up Mormonism. I'm like, what are they even talking about? I was like, I'm into this space where I'm learning everything and I love it. But it was, I think the first time I felt like, oh no, that's not good. Like they're saying that you can like prove this is not historical because of DNA. And I had enough kind of experience with reading all this in faith that I'm like, well, yeah, they're minimizing it. It's more complex than that. And so, so I just start looking into that. And, I even went through like a Heartlander phase where I'm like watching Meldrum's like DVDs. I actually went to one of his things in Logan and was like, this is tricky.
What year was this?
This is like 2008.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I thought some of this is pretty wonky to me, but what he has going for him is he doesn't have to dismiss Joseph Smith, right? And BYU and the Farms folks, it was the Maxwell Institute maybe at the time, they kind of do that. And so I'm like, I see where it's coming from, but I'm not totally on board, but I want to just increase my knowledge, and that's something to consider, right? And so I just started reading a lot of these things that I didn't know about, and it helped. It led to this, again, this sense of superiority, I think, and elitism, right? So initially, my delving into these things that are really complex and troublesome for people weren't for me. They helped. They helped actually feed my faith, which is that's probably not super unique, right?
Just depends, but that's Patrick Mason. We just had him on Mormon Stories, and
I love that.
He
episode.
loved it.
Mm-hmm.
He loved that stuff.
Yeah.
And you do have these apologists say, everything I've read has just only strengthened my faith. It just depends. I think it just depends on the person.
Yeah. So it helped. And it made me read more. So I read a compilation of essays from the Maxwell Institute about the DNA issue. And it was perfect for me at the time because it used terms I didn't get. And it was like, these are all geneticists at BYU. These are biologists, and they say, there's no way to really study this. And I don't remember the arguments exactly, but it was just, oh, I'm good. Right. So anything that did pop up, Fair and Farms or whatever they were called would placate me and think, okay, I'm good. There are these responses. And, so that's sort of like the phase I was at there in college about when I was going to graduate from USU with my master's, was apologetics. I know all the stuff. You know, I read Given's By the Hand of Mormon and, you know, all the things. So that's sort of where I was at that point. I don't know if we want to kick it over to Mitch now with your stuff.
No, let's keep going. So, so what year did you graduate from USU?
This was 08.
08?
Yeah.
All right. Let's take it to the point. What did your faith kind of start unraveling, Mitch? Estimate.
Maybe like 2 years ago, year and a half ago.
So 20.
Yeah, so kind of
we got
after,
another 12
after
years.
COVID.
All right.
That's right.
Let me catch
That's
up.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, just take us through
Your marriage and stuff.
your faith journey.
That's important.
Your
Yeah.
marriage, yeah.
So I meet my wife.
What was your job at the time?
You know, yeah. So I was a grad instructor, and she may have been a student in a class, maybe. So we met possibly through that way. May have started dating after the semester was over and after grades were posted. So it's actually a good courtship story, but different time. So we start dating, we get engaged, and I know full well, like, wait, there's something I need to tell you. So we're maybe 2 weeks in, maybe 3 weeks in. And I thought, I know this isn't serious yet, but there's something I have to tell you. And she's like, okay. And I was really serious about it. And I had learned to like hype stuff up. And then when you tell them, oh, that's not too bad, right? And so I needed to tell her about my mission experience. And because, you know, you have a right to know if you want to cut this off because of that, because I know that you promised yourself when you were 12 that you needed to marry all the stuff, all the boxes, right? And I don't check that box. And so I told her, and, you know, she's like, why would you think I care about that? And I'm like, I don't, but I'm just checking because this can be a problem. And I said, and if this goes somewhere, your parents, you know, might want to know. And she's like, why would they have any say in this? She's like, they're not from Utah. Don't worry about that. Like, that was her response, right? She's from Seattle. So I meet my wife. We are engaged, I think like a year total. We're dating and engaged, and then we get married. So this is 08. And she's finishing up some of her stuff at USU so we can transfer. And I guess, like, if we're looking at kind of phases, you know, I was in this very good space of, I know the issues. I mean, did I really on a deep level? Like, no. Did I ever read responses to apologetics? No. Did I ever assume that there were good reasons that counter apologetics? No. Did I know even 10% of the issues that I know now? No. Right. But it was a good space to be. And, I had other experiences. Like one day we were living in Sugar House, and Elder Oak shows up to our ward, and he, it was early, and for some reason that ward, like, no one came on time. So when it started at 9, Oaks is up on the stand, and there's like 10 people there, and he's like, I'm not here on assignment. Like, I might get up for like 2 minutes at the end, but just like do your thing. Cause I was speaking, Liz and I were speaking that day about marriage. And so I remember even like, I had a joke in my thing that was, it's dumb, but it was something like, Liz's grandpa says like everything is shared in a marriage. And I took that to heart, and it's a good thing I like wearing women's underwear. Like, it was just something like that was a little edgy for my ward, but I was just going to test the waters. But Oaks is behind me. So I'm like, I'm going to do it. Let's just see what happens. So I do it, and he's like laughing hysterically. I mean, I like look back, and he's like, I'm like, oh, I didn't think that he was like that, you know? He shows up in our primary class and sits in at one point, and he pulls me aside after I talk, and he's like, hey, I was like, okay, here it comes. He's going to do it privately. He's going to chastise me. And he says, you said something about the brother of Jared, and you had a really interesting take on that, on like why someone wouldn't pray for like 3 years. I'm probably getting this wrong, but it was some detail like that I had an interpretation on. And he's like, I never really thought about it like that. Here's what I think maybe is going on. I was like, oh, like, I thought you guys know everything. I thought, you know, like Jesus just told you. Like, I don't think I was that like naive about it or whatever, but that was significant. This was one of the last times I actually wrote in my journal. I was like, oh, this fun thing happened, and they're people, right? Like, they're people like us. And so I think I intellectually knew that, but it wasn't really confirmed until I had that experience. So so I had little instances like that would come up. So I'm looking for work. I'm trying to find teaching jobs, which is difficult without a PhD. And I ended up getting a job at Westminster and UVU. So we moved to Salt Lake. My wife transfers to the U. And I want to say I can speed this up because that's where I was probably until 2013. Just things were great. We had a good job. We had our first kid, first daughter. And I was enjoying church and making friends and all that. So I think the next biggest shift was more of social things. So it was initially historical, and I didn't really have issues because I was reading stuff that worked for me, that explained things, right? And even things that didn't have answers, I was okay to well, maybe that doesn't matter or whatever. And so I remember the Kate Kelly stuff. So ordained women, for those who may not know, is a movement of ordaining women to the priesthood, which is not currently a practice and hasn't been. And I just started thinking more about these things, probably because I'm married now and I see I'm living kind of your experience with you now. And there were these things that would kind of bother me. You'd have a new bishopric come over and meet you and they'd be like, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I teach and I do this. And they're like, cool. And I'd be like, are you going to ask my wife what she does? Cause she teaches, and I would say stuff like this cause it kind of bugged me. And I just started noticing this. I'm like, man, maybe I've been blind to things as a man. Maybe I should think more about this. And so I just tried to read more about Kate Kelly and not just her, but the arguments that they were making. And I'm like, they're actually making decent historical arguments that seem to be within doctrinal precedents to make this case. And I'm talking to Liz about it a little bit. And this is also about when the Gospel Topics essays come out. And I had heard a little bit about Abraham. I can't remember if Bushman talks about it or not, but probably does a little bit. So maybe I've been introduced to it somewhat. But I remember watering my lawn one time and just hearing a Radio West or something with Doug Fabrizio about this essay that just drops, right? And it might not have been, that probably wasn't the first one that came out, and just thinking whoa, this is really cool. Revelation is cooler than we thought. That's kind of how I dealt with it.
That was the Book of Abraham essay?
Yeah. Okay. That maybe, and you know what? Now I'm psychoanalyzing myself again in the moment. I think it took this incomprehensible divine thing that was inaccessible to someone like me because I didn't go on a mission and all the other things, and it made it accessible. So it wasn't what we thought. It was, it's much more expansive and, radical and whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think my brain was had to frame it that way. Right. And so it didn't bother me. And I thought, these are cool. These essays are coming out and all this. We're getting close to you, right? 2014 about.
Yep.
And so let me get to the thing that kind of I actually felt like was a major crack. And then we'll go to Mitch because we start combining now. So I'm teaching at BYU. So at this time I was teaching full-time at UVU, teaching part-time at BYU, and I absolutely loved it. I loved both for different reasons. And I was driving home from BYU and probably was listening to Radio West. And they were talking about the ordained movement. They were talking about Revelation, and it's possible that you were on there. I don't remember, but there was a few people that Fabrizio was interviewing, and he'll try to have a rep from the church if they decide to ever go on there. And the thought came up, and it was something I hadn't really thought about. And this also applied to LGBTQ issues as well. And someone on there, again, it might have been you, I don't know, made a comment well, these major things that are happening, these big social issues, and this was all social. There wasn't really any history here. It was a question: why is it that the LDS Church just seems behind every time? And when they change, it's often grassroots. Like it's people that are complaining about it. It's like external pressure, and I didn't know a lot about stuff with BYU and the IRS and these other things at the time, but shouldn't prophet, seers, and revelators, like, should it be reversed? Like, why are they following the average members on this? And it gave me pause, and I think almost gave me like a panic attack because I hadn't ever thought about it like that, because I had never put more than one thing together. This is something you guys talk about a lot on Mormon Stories, is apologetics is amazing when you keep on like those goggles that like isolate issues, right? When we start putting things together, it becomes an issue. And so the first kind of big catalyst for me, there's a problem, and I need to think more about this, was that idea of Revelation isn't working the way that it's supposed to work. And well, maybe I'm not understanding it right. Like, so I immediately started kind of blaming myself, but I could not suppress that feeling of like, you actually have to think about this. And I didn't talk to my wife about it at the time because I was terrified. I'm like, this is actually a real significant problem, and I don't know what to do about this. So let's read some Givens. Let's read Crucible of Doubt. And that's what I would do, which was helpful, but it did not. Nothing seemed to address that problem. So that was probably 2014. And that was the first kind of major thing that started the journey of other major things that compounded, that really bothered me, that it hurt. I mean, it was like physical, like, no, this is Satan. Like all the things that you're supposed to like thought stop, right? I did all the things, but it was and it was from BYU to Saratoga Springs. So it was like a 40-minute drive, a very long, like, what do I do with this? So that was where I was when you came in. Yeah.
And just really quickly, for those who are brand new to all this, 2014 was the year that Kate Kelly and I, within a week of each other, both received notifications of our disciplinary council in mid-2014. Kate was excommunicated, I believe, by the summer of 2014, and my excommunication was delayed until winter of 2015. I recorded my exchanges with my bishop and stake president, and I've shared those on Mormon Stories. People really value to hear those exchanges, so I'm just going to put a plug for that because it's, I think, one of the most important things I've ever shared on Mormon Stories. Margi's nodding. And Margi makes a cameo in those discussions with Brian King. Right,
Imagine.
Anyway, so 2014 and 15 were kind of big years.
Yeah.
Kind of watershed moments, not because of me and Kate. It was like the culmination of the internet, the gospel topics essays, blogs, podcasts, activism. And 2015, 14, they were watershed years. Yeah.
I knew who you were, and I knew that you had this podcast, and it was not like, watch out for him or his stuff's amazing, listen to it. I knew that was a thing that existed, the podcast. So I wasn't listening to Mormon Stories. That's just a common thing. Like, oh, you started this thing and that led to, I didn't. I think the first full episode I ever listened to was probably 2 years ago. So that really wasn't on my radar at the time. I do remember real quick reading the priesthood ban essay, thinking like, yes, progress, this is good. I mean, they're owning things, but there were things in there, even in the space I was, where I wanted, like, please help solve my problems, essays and other materials I was reading. I just thought, how does God let this happen for like 130 years? Like, I'm not seeing that in the essay. So, okay, Brigham Young is kind of racist, man of his times. Cool. I can get behind that. Brigham Young did a lot of fun stuff. So, but is God complicit then? And what does that say? And so it was just kind of this, I don't know how to get out of God. At best case scenario is just lets this happen. And it's real people that are being denied like saving ordinances. Why? Like why there's so many prophets that like you could have, and well, the world wasn't ready and all this. And I just stopped accepting those reasons as readily. I think maybe that's it. But like, it just seems like I'm in this tight spot and I don't know how to, well, no, the church is in a tight spot. I'm like, it's not my problem. I didn't do any of this. So how do I make sense of this? And, I'm in like an elders conference. I'm teaching Sunday school in my family ward. And,
I would imagine you would have started to be feeling redeemed. It's like, okay, I had that mission experience, but I've made good. I've strengthened my faith. I got married in the temple.
Yeah.
Now I'm serving in all the callings. Bishops even think I'm cool. Bishops are even recommending.
I'm teaching Sunday school to like people with kids and adults. And
you're like redeemed. You're like redeemed, Chris.
Did it feel that way?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I didn't think about it like that at the time, but it absolutely gave me kind of a license to like, you're okay. I mean, you didn't marry a 14-year-old when you were 37. Like, you're doing okay, right? It did. I think it actually did help. And so that probably slowed it down. But the difference was it wasn't about me and like my place within, my level of worthiness. It was, is this true? And that had not happened yet, really up until this point. And I think it was moving into like social issues and concerns and being like, well, now I have this friend who is gay. I know this person. None of this is making any sense. Like, how do I work with this? Well, we don't know everything. And I'm like, yeah, but I can't just not think about this. And so I was still very kind of guarded, but I would make these moves where maybe there's because it still was very lonely, because it's still Utah County. Maybe there are other people that I can talk to that maybe like find a space. And so I remember teaching actually a lesson it was something in Nephi, and it was the like chapter where he beheads Laban. And I thought, oh, maybe I can be vulnerable and just say, no, it was just, I think it was the lesson about like likening scriptures and, how can we be like Jesus and figures in the scriptures. So I decided to use that example as this is real. Like, he is real right here. And I can relate to that. It's not that I relate to beheading someone while they're drunk and passed out, but I can relate to this is messy and I don't think he loves this and he's real. And I was really excited. I was prepping it and I was like, Liz, I think I'm going to like be open about this. And then I do. And then the first comment, I don't blame the guy, but he's probably like in his 80s. And he was like, yeah, so I just try to be like the savior. And just like, it was like an immediate, like, no.
Invalidating.
Yep. And I just was like, completely shut down. I was like, okay, well, what else do you guys think? And I was like, I'm done talking. I walked home. Yes, I got offended. Sorry, Bednar. My fault. I walked home. I was like, okay. And I learned a lesson, like, don't do that. I learned later, actually, a couple months later, that there's a high councilman who's about my age, and we kind of became friends a little bit. And he's like, yeah, you were almost released, but I went to bat for you because I'm like, there are people like him, these fringy, like liberal Mormons, right? Who, and I'm in academia, so like you get that label, right? That he reaches people that, and maybe it's only two people, but like we have the seminary, teacher, we have all these other teachers that get to everybody else. So he kind of went to bat for me and was able to like stay in my execution for a while, but it didn't last very long. And I knew like, okay, here are the boundaries. Here's what you can say when you're in church. Here's what you can't. And I was learning to negotiate those boundaries and try to work through stuff.
Yeah.
All right. That's where I was. So enter.
Margi's nodding. You want to say, Margi?
Well, it's familiar, right?
Yeah.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, Margi and I lost our faith in 2001. We stayed active until 2014. Wow. For the better part of 13.
To varying degrees at different times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, we know trying to do the progressive, liberal, semi-believing Mormon thing quite well.
And I would like fluctuate between, like, I would view this scale of, on the one end, I think the church is probably true, but it might not be. So let's see, right? And it was like comforting to have that ambiguity. And then the next day I'd be like, it's probably not, but it might be. Let's see what happens, right? And so I was in that space for like that was where I was with you for probably till about 2017, 18, and then things were ramped up. So, okay, I'm good. I'm done.
All right.
I'm like totally
all
done.
right. Thanks, Chris. That's super good. No, that's meat and potatoes Mormon story stuff right there. So thanks for sharing. So Mitch, you get off your mission from Ukraine.
Yep. So I got off my mission from Ukraine and I went right back to BYU, Idaho for a semester before I transferred to BYU in Provo. And I remember it was a really bad culture shock for me. In Ukraine, people are very stoic. They take longer to open up, but they're very deep, and you make you make a few really strong connections. And I remember going back to BYU Idaho and everyone's smiling, which is kind of seen as weird in Ukraine. This is just like on the street, and people are saying hi, and just socially, I had a really hard time just going immediately from 2 years in Ukraine to right back at BYU Idaho. I came back and had like a weekend, and then I started the semester. So it was a really quick kind of shock, I guess, for me. And I was feeling kind of depressed at BYU Idaho. Didn't really have a lot of friends. A lot of people I knew were now gone. And so it was a really hard transition for me. I ended up deciding, I can't stay here. So, I didn't really have a plan. I was like, okay, I'll go to BYU Provo. Maybe that'll be a better situation. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to study, but I decided, my grandpa's a civil engineer. I enjoy math and science. I could do civil engineering. They're just barely starting a program here, and it's pretty strong at BYU Provo. So that might make, sense on a letter of, why I'm transferring, why I want to get into BYU Provo. Talked to my dad. He helped me kind of write some essays and ended up getting into BYU Provo. So I came home from my mission kind of September 2014, went to BYU Idaho for that semester and was in BYU Provo in December of 2015. Got a job as a janitor at the MTC, was in a singles ward, and that's when I first met my wife. We were in the same family home evening group. She came home off her mission to Spain in December 2015. So we both came to, she had been at BYU, but now she was back at BYU, and that's kind of when we met in the singles ward. We were friends, we were kind of acquaintances for a while, friends for a summer. And we ended up started to date at the end of the summer of 2015. It was pretty, I guess, slower progression from some BYU stories, but not super slow. We started dating end of August 2015, and ended up getting engaged around January 2016, and we ended up getting married in April of 2016. And coming back from my mission, I kind of amped up the spirituality in my life. I got to the point I wouldn't listen to much music other than church music, just because that was the rules on my mission, and that's kind of what I felt comfortable with on my mission. I still exercised pretty frequently, but I would listen to conference talks or church music when I exercised. I'd go on runs and listen to a talk or something like that, an old conference talk. I like to listen to, ones from the 80s, 90s, whatever I could really listen to. I got into church history, but from faithful sources. I would go to Pioneer Book on Center Street in Provo and buy a book, from a faithful Mormon author and read about a different topic in Mormon history. There was a series on the Joseph Smith papers, like a video series that I found that were like, 15, 20, 30-minute episodes. And I was just so excited to listen to them. And I was learning all this stuff about history, and I thought it was great. And my religious, I would say scrupulosity at that point kind of set in. I kind of had like check boxes for myself. I needed to read the scriptures at least a half hour every day. I needed to, do certain things to feel good about myself, to feel like I was doing okay. We were in a married ward, I guess, at the time after I got married, going to BYU. And, I got a calling as a teacher, and I was like, okay, I'm doing good. I kind of connected with what you said earlier, Margi, about kind of the redemption from feeling kind of like a failure on my mission. I was like, hey, I'm doing good. I got called as a counselor in the elders quorum presidency. I was like, okay, this is a good trajectory. Like the Lord, is happy with me. I'm, everything I'm doing is kind of fueling this. And I end up getting.
Can I just note one quick thing?
Please do.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, don't
people
apologize.
Don't like when I interrupt, but Chris, isn't it interesting that like you were suffering for returning home early from a mission?
Mm-hmm.
He served the full mission and was still tormented for his unworthiness. So you were both tormented.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yep.
You're kind of tormented either way. You're on the wheel of kind of like the wheel of
That's
hustling
right.
for love and acceptance either way, or the wheel of shame, whatever you want to call it. You're on it.
Yep.
No matter where you are in Mormonism, you're kind of on it.
You're always on the wheel.
You're either sinful or you're obedient but feeling unworthy. Anyway, sorry, just wanted to note that.
So I was in the elders quorum presidency, got called as the president, and this was kind of an affirmation to me that I'm on the right track now, and I'm faithful, and I'm doing great, and I was the elders quorum president for a while, ended up getting called to a bishopric in the married ward. Was like, okay, like this is going the right way. Not that I was aspiring to callings, but I just felt like this is like the Lord saying like you're doing good, you're things like that. And I think maybe it was around that time that maybe things started, I wouldn't say chipping away at that point, but maybe questions came up. So marrying my wife, she grew up in Seattle. She was a pretty progressive person I would say for a member of the church. She would have classes. She had a class at BYU, and her professor had a gay son, and her professor would share like, I accept him and support him, and that's totally fine. And, my relationship with my son is more important than, anything else. And my wife would share these ideas with me, and I would inside kind of push back, but I didn't really have an answer to why I don't agree with what she was telling me. But yeah, so she would share ideas like this. I would say pretty frequently, ways that she had been hurt in the church by being a woman. And I would, internally push back, but not really have any good answers for her. As we went along in our marriage, kind of my scrupulosity increased when we, would pay tithing. She was like, let's just do it on our net. And I would say, no, we need to pay tithing on our gross. And, we're working as apartment managers, we're getting rent in exchange for your work as an apartment manager. We need to pay, estimate what our rent would be and pay tithing on that. And we need to be really generous with our fast offerings. And I was working, as I'm not making a lot of money cleaning toilets at the MTC. And, she was like hesitant about this, but later she shared with me that she felt, like she didn't really have any grounds to push back. So this went on, and we had our first son, and when we had him, we were at the hospital in Orem, and when he came out, we found out he had hydrocephalus. So his head had swollen really big. They hadn't caught it in the ultrasounds, and we ended up taking a ambulance ride to Primary Children's for him to have brain surgery when he was like 2 days old. I was on BYU health insurance. My wife was still on her parents' insurance. We really had almost no money, enough to not get into debt at BYU, but not really any money to save anything. And so we ended up applying for Medicaid, and my son had 2 surgeries, like one a couple days old, then one 3 months later. And I think together they had costed like $150,000, and Medicaid saved our life at the time because, there was no way we were paying for that, and it saved his life. But I remember, I listened to talks while I exercised, and I would listen to these talks, and a couple of them were from President Benson, and he was talking about socialism is bad. You shouldn't accept any help from the government. And I was just feeling torn up inside, and, like I'm not doing enough. I'm not support my family. Why can't I, provide? Going to school with a kid and a wife was really hard. And we got to the point where we were having a hard time, providing food enough food to eat. And so we got in another government program. It's called WIC, Women, Infant, Children. Sorry. Where we're now able to buy vegetables so my wife and son, could have some healthy food. And I just remember feeling so torn up inside that, why am I not good enough to be able to provide this at this point to my family? And I had moved on from the MTC, and, I had an engineering internship, but it was still like $12 an hour. I was working as a research assistant and also helping doing the apartment managing, Monson Apartments in Provo. So I was working 3 jobs, doing school. My wife was working a job, and we ended up getting pregnant again. We didn't plan on it. But I came home. My wife said, "Sit down," and I said, "What's up?" And she's like, "Sit down." And I was like, "No, I just got home. I'm gonna get a snack." And she got kind of pissed and threw a pregnancy test at me, and we started crying, and we were like, how is this gonna work? How are we gonna have a second kid? I'm still finishing my undergrad. We're maybe making like 20 grand a year between us, and we're paying like $8,000 in tithing and offerings at the time, just because we felt like this is what we needed to do, so the Lord would help us. And so a lot of feelings of like these programs really helped us, but prophets have like kind of been down on them. So that started to come into play. A lot of, my wife has these progressive views on social issues. Prophets haven't always taken that stance, and it was kind of, an internal back and forth. And I remember Chris, I guess when I came into the family, my view of Chris was, Chris is this really nice guy. He's kind of sarcastic. I don't know if he hates me or likes me. He has some weird church views, so I'll just sit and like nod and talk to him, about it because he likes to talk about it. But like, he seems like he's kind of faithful. We'll be friends, but like I don't have to necessarily believe all these weird things he says about the church. I remember
Why
one
are you
thing.
laughing, Margi?
Oh,
I just can visualize the nod and.
Because like I was on one side of the spectrum and he was on the other. I was
that
very
brother-in-law. I really
yeah. I was very literalist about everything, and anyway.
Well,
Haven't-
weird liberal brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Haven't we all witnessed conversations at family gatherings where that is exactly what's happening? There's one person talking and the other person's like,
Thinking, how do I get out of
that's
here?
right.
Yeah.
Like,
How do I get this guy to
I
shut
really
up?
need to.
What a jerk.
And I didn't think that. I enjoyed time with you, and we connected on other things.
Well,
academic things.
Liz she would take me aside and be like, you need to like open up to Mitch because, we already had the other brother-in-law. I was like, we're good. Tyler and I are close.
Yeah. So I'm married to the middle. So our wives are in a family of 5 girls, no brothers, and Chris married the oldest, and I married the middle child, and we have another brother-in-law who's kind of in between us. And the younger two aren't married yet.
It did, and I was hesitant because I'm like, he's so
gung-ho.
like super, return missionary guy. Like, we gotta figure out what the Venn diagram common ground area is. And one of the things that did it was how I'm getting emotional. Mitch with my kids was I was like, yeah, she should marry this guy. He was so good with my kids.
That's beautiful.
Anyway, yeah, I love kids.
But but I was weird. So that's what we were talking about before.
I remember one Thanksgiving we were at your house, Chris, in Ephraim, and our other brother-in-law was there, and we had a conversation about polygamy. And Chris brought up, hey, there's this this interesting book called Rough Stone Rolling. It's by a church member. You would like this. And so I was like, okay, cool. And I wrote it down, and I got the book, and I listened to the audio book. And I remember learning a lot that I had never learned about. I didn't really know about Joseph Smith's polygamy. I didn't really know about the Kinderhook plates, about how Joseph Smith was like anointed himself like king of the world and kind of acted like a general a lot of times. And there were a lot of aggressions from Mormons to the others that I didn't really know about. But I was still very faithful at this point, and I kind of rationalized it, and I figured out a way to make it work. But I was like, hey, I really like learning about the prophets, so I was like, okay, let me get a book on Brigham Young now. And I found a book, and it wasn't by a church member, but I was like, oh, it's a biography, and this will be cool. Learn about the next prophet. Maybe I'll just do this with all the prophets. And in Brigham Young's biography was a lot harder for me to swallow, and just learning a lot about
John Turner's book.
I don't remember which one it was.
Pretty new. Don't know. Okay,
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
And you didn't tell me any of this. Like, I didn't even know you read Rough Stone Rolling.
No.
So I wasn't trying to read this.
Well, I was going to say that.
Sucker.
Like
no, he was not that way at all.
You guys just kind of brushed over something really significant, because when you're quietly liberal, or even known to be liberal, but you're in a believing family, you feel this tension because you're different than everybody else. You know things that most people don't know. You feel sometimes alone and isolated. And you also want people to know the truth, and you want people to see the world clearly and with all the information. And so tell me if I'm wrong, Chris, but you feel this tug of like, do I talk about the history that I know or the tough things with my believing family, or do I just let it go? And, you said you shared Rough Stone Rolling with him, and he just bit it like a fish on a on
and that was the last I heard about it for like a year. I didn't even know that you had started reading.
But sometimes when you make that introduction, the person feels threatened. They feel afraid. They feel like you're trying to take their testimony away. Their believing spouse may get threatened. Why are you recommending an apostate book to my believing husband? And it can cause a lot of drama. So you guys passed over kind of a really significant step in your both of your progression.
If I remember right, like it was the same time we were talking about, like I had Joanna Brooks's book, like White Supremacy in the Mormon Church. I can't remember the title. The title sounds so much worse than what's in the book. It's just history. And you were like, what is that? I was like, oh, and I hit it because it looks bad, right? And I was like, oh, it's just this history book. And then I used that, I think, as a way to transition into to Bushman's book, because I'm like, don't read this thing. Like, it's just history of the church and it deals with race, but maybe do this other one first and get there. So I was trying to be respectful. I was like, he's in the family. I don't want to cause these issues. Even with Liz, I was a little, I was holding back on quite a bit too. So yeah.
That's what my question was. So with regard to your in-law family culture, were they, how would you describe them with regard to books like Rough Stone Rolling? Or it feels like, as you're talking about both your wives, there is a little bit more of a liberal-ish kind of approach. So what is it like at family gatherings, and what were you feeling during that time? Both of you.
Want me to go first? I think on a lot of social issues, I think my wife was a lot more progressive than me and kind of pushed me along, as, I was very orthodox and very literalist in a lot of my beliefs. She grew up, with gay friends and, in Seattle, in a good amount of, difference of opinion and thought. And so a lot of those issues, she didn't really see them as problems, that I did. Our in-laws are pretty open in their views, I would say.
Yeah, even I have really good conversations with my mother-in-law often, and this was probably back in 2016, so kind of post-exclusion policy. That was another major issue at the time, and we had a really good conversation about it, and I just very open was like, look, I don't, there's no way out of this. It just doesn't make any sense. Not just the policy stuff, but just the doctrine about how is God making them this way, and then
you're talking about LGBT people.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I have friends who are telling me about their experiences, and mother-in-law was just like, yeah, it's hard. I don't know if there are answers to that. And so we had really good conversations where I could kind of reveal a little bit more to her than maybe some other people, including my own parents. I mean, I feel bad that they were always late to the party because I'm like, I'm going to destroy my mom. So nope. And part of it too is like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'll solve it. And then I'll tell people this like funny thing I had for 5 years, whatever. So yeah, so our in-laws are, like it's I think a really good environment, and we'll probably talk more about that where we are now, but.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So about kind of when COVID hit, I had some health problems and lost like 50 pounds and was bedridden for a while. And we ended up leaving Provo. I had done grad school and graduated with a master's degree and got a job in Salt Lake. And we ended up buying a little townhouse out in Magna. So we're kind of adjusting to a new ward. I didn't really have a bunch of callings like I had before. Kind of felt a little bit adrift. Church went online. Most of our ward had just been combined with another ward. It seems like, they were combining a lot of wards in Magna at the time. It was a very old demographic. I didn't have those young people to connect with, same area of life. And I remember Elders Quorum was just so boring. And it's just because a lot of people were connecting on common things they were going through, and they were all grandpas, and I was just a new dad, and so I got really bored, and I started exploring historical things on my phone during Elders Quorum, and during Sacrament I would research blacks in the priesthood, or LGBT history in the church, things like that, and then not with church going online, and me being sick for a little while, I stopped reading my scriptures every day. I started exploring, what do I think about different social issues, and it was very internally torn for a while. I remember John, at the time I had decided internally that, being LGBT, I didn't think it was a choice. Listening to the science, I have a scientific background with my, degree in engineering. So I was like, okay, how do I square this? How do I make this work as a believing member? I came across a TED Talk that you had done at USU. I believe it was called Mormon and Ally, or something similar. Like, that was in the title. I was like Googling things like that, and it came up, and I listened to it at work while I was, doing some work. And I was like, this is it. Like, I can make it work. Like, this is great. Like, I can believe, but also support those who are LGBT, and like let them, express themselves and live, and I don't have to like have a conflict. And so I had talked a little bit with Chris at the time, and I sent him this TED Talk, and I was like, Chris, like, you got to listen to this. Like, this is awesome. Like, we can kind of make it work. And I got a text back like 5 minutes later. Yeah, I watched this years ago. He got excommunicated. And I was like, oh, like that was a big kind of hitter to me. And, kind of led to me.
Why are you so dismissive, Chris?
I was trying to help. It sounds so bad. I just like, he's going to go down this path. And then, so I was like, well, maybe I can cut it off because this might be bad for you.
Which path?
Huh?
Which path was he about to go down?
He's going to start watching Mormon stories, and, yeah. So it's like, I agree with
then meth, like what?
The drugs, so just so you know, informed consent. That's what I was trying to do. All right. We value that here. So I was like, just maybe you want to know this, but I thought you knew already. So
I had no clue.
I didn't realize I was like,
I didn't even know it was that old. I didn't look at the date.
Yeah.
So you were still believing and active, semi-believing and active at this point, even up to 2019.
Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you did. How long were you doing the progressive liberal Mormon
long
thing?
time.
You're a long.
It like, here's some like quick bullet points. Exclusion policy 2015. I stopped wearing garments because I felt like I have too many issues right now. I don't know what to do with these things. So, and I haven't gone to the temple, so I'm not gonna. This feels wrong. I'm not doing my covenants. I'm not living up to my covenants that I've made. That's hard to hide from a spouse. Mm-hmm. Like, there are ways, but it's tricky, But so that kind of like well, what's going on? And my wife and I kind of both have this habit of not confronting things until it explodes. And, you know, it can be a problem. So we just didn't talk about it for a while. And she's like, why are you wearing garments? And like, well, I think actually at the time I'm like, I've gained some weight, like, and I need to get like mediums.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was like, so don't worry about it. Like, I'll get there. And now I'm like, crap, I can't lose weight again because like this is
wear garments.
this is a problem to maintain this reason. So we moved to Orem, new ward, and I was like, hey, you know, every time we do that, it's like reset. Let's do this again. Like, I'm going to meet new people, and no one knows me, so maybe I can like lean into the progressive thing. Nope, it was the opposite. I just further like fold in and become this like quiet, you know, like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like that, and it just kind of starts escalating. You know, we start getting politics involved. I'm like, I don't know. I do not represent the views of the podcast, but why are people loving Trump? Like, what the hell's going on? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, I have voted Republican, you know, I voted Democrat. And I just started seeing like the blending of, you know, conservative politics. I know I missed the whole Benson era. So but like, I don't like this, you know? But I didn't say anything. And so I was very, very quiet. I made like one kind of friend in my ward. People were friendly. It wasn't really I didn't feel like I was being picked on or something like that, but I didn't feel comfortable to say anything. And so that kind of ramped it up. And then I talked to my bishop and say, hey, I don't know if I should have a temple recommend. You know, I'm not wearing garments. I've had these issues. And he was really good about it. He was like,
you were teaching at BYU at the time,
yeah,
though, right? So
yeah.
it mattered.
And he said, well, I've never had that happen to me, so I can't really relate. But I know people in the ward who like maybe there was a guy who like writes for Dialogue, and you know, and that was the space I was in. Like, I'm reading Dialogue, I'm reading Sunstone, like I'm reading Patrick Mason's Planted, you know, in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? And I'm like, that's how committed I was. We're in Hawaii, and I'm reading like a faithful promoting Mormon book because I'm like there's got to be a way to fix this stuff. Great book, by the way. I actually loved the episode that you did with Patrick Mason. So I tell the bishop, and he was really good about it. And then it was like 2 days later, I get a call from like BYU's academic affairs or whatever it was coming out of. Can you meet with us? And yeah, and I thought a student complained about something. I'm like, what did I do? I make jokes, but I'm pretty safe there. So what happened? And I get called in, and it was, hey, so your bishop didn't endorse you and didn't sign it, and like, thanks for your service. I'm like, what? And he's like smiling about it. I'm like, your job's fun. But he says, well, like, you can finish out the semester. This is like
so your bishop told on you?
I really liked this bishop, and I'm just assuming it was just he didn't check a box. Like, that's probably what happened. Right?
I don't think it works that way.
But he's so good.
You're being
so wait, what I'm hearing is you had no sense. You had no sense when you talked to the bishop that actually it was gonna he was gonna on some level.
You know what? Okay, you're probably right, because it wasn't a renewal. It was, I'm initiating this. I don't know if I should have this. What do you think? And he was like, okay, well. And then it was, so he, I guess.
But he wasn't direct
there,
with you.
Like,
and
under
saying,
the table, there's like
right.
there's like a red button, and he's like, bleep, and then it like alerts the BYU police or whatever, right? I don't know, but he was trying to help, I guess, doing his job. I don't hold any malice towards this bishop.
No, he was defending the kingdom. He was a watchman on the tower,
so
making sure those BYU young, vulnerable BYU testimonies remain pure and safe.
That's right.
Sure, yeah, and I brought that up. So when I'm in this meeting, he says, well, you can finish out the semester. And I'm like, well, yeah. And I says, does it matter that like I can show you like 10 years almost of like student evaluations that say this class prepped me better than my mission prep class? Because it's all about argument and persuasion and understanding other people's viewpoints. And he's like, no, like none of that matters, right? So they can get you fired, but they're not going to save you. So I said, okay, well, he's like, there is a 90-day probation period we can do. And I'm like, in my head, $15,000. Yeah, maybe, you know, we should make this work. But I wanted to be authentic about it. I was like, I don't want to live this thing where I have to go lie to my bishop because I'm having these issues. So it's okay to have issues, right? As long as I'm not like going on Mormon Stories or, whatever. So that's kind of what I did. As I did this plan and I worked with them, and I'm like, I still believe, and I did. And I'm like, but do you live the word of wisdom? Like, I don't drink Monsters and like dip sugar cookies into Mountain Dews, and I take care of my body, but I drink coffee. Yeah, I'm good, right? Like that was the way that I kind of, and I know that the recommended interview questions are getting more like that, where you can kind of like, yeah, I try to wear garments, you know, and that was like
drinking coffee at this point, right?
Yeah, and that was like the biggest one where those are the garment questionings. I'm like, that one's harder to like. So I would like wear them for a few weeks before. I'm like, I'm back into it. And then I would wear them a few weeks after. And then I'd be like, well, so I was just kind of like, try to find this space where I was being me, but also not totally violating, you know, these laws and covenants and stuff. But it wears on you. And it's like, I got to go in. And I mentioned this to you before we were on, but my experience was if you have a calling, your bishop just doesn't even bother you. He just renews it. But if you don't, you know, then they check in and have the conversation, right? And I get it. Like I know people listening are like, you sign up for this thing just like all the students. Like that's true, right? But like people change. You know, I'm teaching for like a decade here, trying to make this work. And I love teaching there. I love the students. I still keep in contact with like dozens of them. And I'd have people reach out. My wife at one point said, you like, that's your mission. Like you're helping students who like don't fit BYU, and you say some like semi-liberal thing and they're like, wait, like I don't see that at a BYU ever. So they come after and talk to me after class, and I'd have these really good conversations. It's one of the reasons why I want to do this. So that was rough. I didn't tell my wife about any of this, by the way. No. Like it wasn't until like 3 years later. I'm like, by the way, I almost got fired from BYU because it's just going to cause all these problems, right? And so that war was really when things started culturally, and the community was just driving me crazy. And there's one thing I wrote down and I was reading a lot more history that wasn't like from Mormon, you know, authors or whatever. And so there's a lesson about. It was Thomas B. Marsh, right? So DNC.
Milk strippings.
Yep. And I'm hearing this and I'm like, I knew better because I had read stuff. And I keep turning to my wife. I'm like, this is such bullshit. Like, okay, this stuff happened. I get it. But here's what's not in the lesson. There's stuff.
Wait. I don't think we've ever really covered this.
Okay, well.
Give the church's version. And then do we need to do this? I guess like. Give the abbreviated version.
So.
Church version is.
Something, it's like this folklore story about, you know, there was a dispute with milk. Strippings? I don't know. And
the Marshes get offended.
Yeah, Tom, who's an apostle, right? He's an apostle. This is Joseph Smith contemporary. He gets offended and then leaves the church, right?
Yeah, and the cautionary tale is, don't be so petty and trivial that you leave the church over something dumb.
Yep.
Like milk strippings.
Yeah. Can you believe it?
Or Simon's writer, like misspells a name, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a Y, not an I. I'm out. I'm leaving, right?
Or like you see someone who saw Joseph Smith playing with a little kid and said a prophet shouldn't be on the ground playing with the kid.
Yeah.
All these cautionary tales that are, you know, dubious, but they send the message, don't be petty, don't be dumb, don't be superficial.
Don't get offended.
Don't leave the church, don't get offended, right? And that's the Thomas B. Marsh story.
Yeah.
As told by correlation.
You're not far off. Like that's probably like lesson purpose. Like people don't leave the church unless it's for dumb reasons. And in my space, that really pissed me off because I was like, how is this not intentional?
Wait, no, I got to give the other story.
Okay, so the stuff that I had read was like there was Danite stuff going on, which is basically this group of like Mormon, what would you call them? Like
warriors,
vigilantes or something?
Yeah. Joseph Smith had a group of kind of vigilantes that would potentially engage in violent behavior to defend the kingdom, basically.
Yeah, and like I get there's like tenuous arguments about was he like telling people to do this? Was he? And Marsh brings us up. He's like, I don't like this. You know, I think this might be hurting our situation. And should we really be doing this? And, you know, he just like wouldn't denounce them. He wouldn't say anything. And he had a problem with this. Like maybe a prophet should. I'm like, you know, does that like prove anything about Joseph Smith? No. But does it give substance to someone's issue with what a prophet should be doing that's not as dumb as playing with a little kid with a stick on the ground? And they don't tell you that part. And there's even some things to suggest that there might have been some shenanigans with Thomas B. Marsh's wife and Joseph maybe like saying, hey, this polygamy thing. And I don't know how much there is in that record, but that doesn't come up. And if it did, you think that's a legitimate concern. And it was also heartbreaking because I'm thinking, what a perfect opportunity to say, these are like serious concerns. How do we like overcome, issues that we might have with modern prophets, with things that we don't agree with, like get vaccinated or whatever. And that's not the lesson, right? And so I'm just like talking in my wife's ear and I'm just like getting really frustrated, and then you learn he rejoins the church in Salt Lake, and Brigham Young in conference is like shaming him, and it's like, you don't learn. Anyway, there's just more to it, right? So I'm like, is it a lie? No. Is it omission? Yes. And I just started seeing more of that. And DNC, it was a bad year to be studying that for where I was, or a good year, depending on your perspective. And I'm just constantly like, and it got to the point where even my wife's like, I don't think, just go home. I mean, go to sacrament, but you're getting so frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I started getting kind of upset. So my frustration was a bit delayed, but it wasn't like the betrayal. It was just like, anyway, so that's sort of where I was when you're coming in the family and we're becoming friends. And
that's so common that there's a mixed faith couple where one starts to doubt and they white knuckle it for as many years as they can. Yeah. But you start to feel like a second class citizen. You start to feel outraged by all the bigotry or false history that's being taught. And then you start wondering, why can everybody else share what they want to share, but I got to stay silent? But then when you start trying to share things, you make everybody uncomfortable and you start to like lose privileges, whether it's BYU or Temple or ordaining your own child or whatever. And ultimately it leads to anger. Mm-hmm. This is like every questioning liberal Mormon ever, except like Patrick Mason and maybe one other person. Yeah. And at some point it turns to rage, because when you just hide and lie and pack these things down over an extended period of time, it creates anger. Yeah. And so some of the angriest people I've ever met are non-believing Mormons who are living a lie, acting like they're believers when they really aren't, and it just wears on them over time.
Yeah. And I was still believing. There were just a lot of problems that I was still very quiet about it. I didn't say anything in church.
It works with progressive
Mormonism. Didn't say much to Liz.
And non-believing.
I remember noticing things like, probably not good, but like, oh, he's not wearing garments. Like, oh, he's drinking coffee. And I remember thinking like, oh no, something's happening. Like, what's wrong? That's a coffee pot. Things like that.
Yeah.
But like also not being able to square it with, he's still a great family man. Like, he's still really nice to me. Things seem to be still going well in your marriage. Like, what's...
Yeah. And you start, it does become kind of almost like a little scientific experiment. Mm-hmm. Like, well, if this is, if there's information that's limited and, like this isn't right and this has been a problem, like, well, maybe I am allowed to kind of do it my way and no one can tell me any better. I know, like, I should just invoke the cafeteria Mormon label, right? Which everybody does, by the way. There's no way you can't do that. So yeah, I'm just like, I don't feel different. I'm like, I tried this latte from Starbucks, which isn't even like real coffee probably. And like, I'm like waiting.
What are you talking about? That's the best coffee.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year.
Pumpkin spice, brought to you by Starbucks. Pumpkin spice.
It's joy. It's a hug
joy
in the morning.
Hug in a cup.
Yeah.
The other day, Margi says to me literally like, the Mormon church was worth leaving just for the coffee alone.
We were in Vermont. We were in Vermont, and it was not like said lightly. I was like, really, coffee and all that it represents and brings to my life.
And by the way, believing Mormons who are listening, that's not us saying to leave the church. That's just, that was a joke. Margi was just saying how much she loves coffee.
But coffee's great though. I remember on my mission, there was a time period where a senior missionary in Ukraine had bought his wife chocolates for Valentine's Day, and they were all coffee. And so he's like, well, like she didn't want them. She's like, oh, gross. And I like took the box, and he's like, you want this? And I was like, yeah. And I like ate like most of the box that day, and I was like, this tastes so good.
Yeah. You binge, man.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So things just ramped up a lot. Um,
At like family gatherings, I feel like we were like pairing off and just chatting for like hours
yeah.
for a while.
Oh.
Just
And
about
it was
different
still
topics.
like you were still tap dancing around it.
Yeah.
And I genuinely didn't know I didn't know you were having any issues at all.
Yeah.
And I would have been more careful if you told me about any of this stuff. So,
But we would talk about tons of different issues. You know, the church's $100 billion fund, you know, women in the church, LGBT topics, blacks in the priesthood, things like that. I don't know, kind of a big
and
swath.
you saying earlier about Theodore and
That's
the
our son who had
financial-
hydrocephalus.
the financial burden, and then you learn about the 130
Yeah,
whatever.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
All the money you had
All the
been
money, and
sacrificing.
we
Yeah.
spent $8,000 of our $20,000 in a year where we had,
it
Let's
shows
finish that.
Yeah, so I looked at our tithing list, but we had spent $8,000 on tithing and offerings, trying to be very generous, you know, at a time where we were on Medicaid for health expenses and using WIC because we couldn't afford, you know, vegetables. You know, it made me very angry. You know, because I believed, you know, when we were giving, generous amounts of money at that, you know, 8,000 might be not a lot to some folks, but, you know, when we were in school with kids, you know, it was a ton of money for us. You know, we did our 10% and then we tried to do a lot in fast offerings and to learn that the church was loaded, and that they pitched that tithing, you know, above all else, even if you're hungry, you know, whatever you always just pay. That was kind of a gut punch.
What about the logic or the justification that the blessings are for you? The church doesn't need your money. You need the blessings. Did that?
Yeah, we also needed vegetables. So, you know, so it just made me very angry.
and like, it just shows how people's different subjective experiences really frame how we react to this information. Because, you know, I learned this and I'm like, dang, that's a lot of money. Like I knew they were wealthy, but man, I could see how that's troubling, you know. But then, like from your experience, like, it's like offensive.
And I always knew the church was well off and well run from a financial perspective. And I always thought that was, you know, a testament to the Lord leading the church, and, you know, financially the church isn't in debt and, you know, they're doing well. But I didn't really understand the scope. And
Hundreds of billions
in stock. You know, I thought a lot of it was in, you know, just real estate and different church buildings, and they had enough money to build chapels and temples. And, you know, I also didn't know, you know, church leaders were paid. Anyway, but so that was a gut punch.
Well, and also to respond to what you're saying too, like we can all agree, right? It's still a choice to pay tithing. And so it seems like it would be reasonable to expect that all the information is given to you so you can choose what you want to do with that. And you didn't have a choice to know that information until it was leaked, right? And so I get that. And I always thought the same thing too. Like, you're blessed and everything, but like, just give me information. Let me make a decision, you know? So yeah.
Because even on my mission president would always harp, you know, the widow's mite. You know, I thought the money was going to help people. Anyway, I just thought it was being used in a lot different ways than what it was.
Yeah.
The quantities were a lot different than I knew.
Yep. Yeah. What did it mean for the both of you now to be connecting and being able to talk openly and to have someone to actually talk to?
I don't know. For me, it was just nice to have someone else who had kind of been through it a little more and who had kind of maybe simmered down a little bit, because I did go through a very angry phase.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the CES Letter thing?
Yeah, I guess I can share, but I guess so. I saw John's TED Talk on Mormon and Ally. Was like, this is great. Texted to Chris. He was like, hey, he's excommunicated. I was like, oh no. So I started just researching like John and found Mormon Stories and started listening to a couple episodes. And I heard like the CES Letter mentioned. And within a span of a day or two, I went home And like, you know, this kind of sounds kind of funny, like the all night read your scriptures and come to a testimony, but from like
Reverse.
10 p.m. to like 3 a.m. I read like the CES Letter and another publication. It was like some CES direct anyway. And a lot of the things in the CES Letter, I had, I guess by that point in the week had heard about, but to see everything laid out, it was very damaging, I guess, to my testimony. And kind of overnight, I decided that I did not believe the church was true anymore. You know, I had been very angry a couple days before, and you know, the church isn't what it seems. But I was still kind of, you know, I still trying to believe. And reading the CES Letter, it kind of all came smashing down, kind of overnight. And it was very abrupt.
Yeah, and it highlights our experiences being different, right? You were still sort of chewing on things,
sure,
right? But it was
a
very
fast
quick,
burn.
right?
Yours is very slow.
I Shawshanked my way.
You're right, yeah.
There it is.
A little spoonful at a time.
Yeah, it was slow, and so I knew like, oh, it was hard for me, even though it was so slow. I'm like worried about you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you sent me that text, have you read the CES Letter? I was like, uh-oh. Like it was really shocking because you hadn't really even brought anything up about you were, I could see in hindsight, you were like testing the waters. Like we were talking that
yeah, we had talked different topics. Yeah.
And I said like, yeah, I don't know if I think the Book of Mormon is historically accurate, but I don't think it matters. I think it's fine. Like not to think that. And then I think that gave you confidence to reveal more. And my response to you is like, I sent you the fair, like big old response to it. Like, oh, but this, like there are answers, you know? And you were like, I've already read that. Like, oh, he's been thinking about this longer than I thought. So, and that kind of opened up like the lines of communication. And I was like trying to be like think about, you know, your family, like make sure that you're in a healthy space, but like trying to like coach you, even though I don't know what I'm doing. So, yeah.
So if I'm kind of observing this dynamic that I've seen 20,000 different ways, normally the semi-believer is kind of suffering in silence, waiting for some other family member to be an ally. And so they're almost like bursting at the seams, trying to prod people to lose their faith so that then they can have someone who at least gets them or someone to talk to during the family event. It sounds like you weren't quite there trying to nudge Mitch out of the church.
You were kind of the opposite.
Yeah, because it was Mitch, right? I mean, it was such a black and white. I'm like, going from like kind of black and white thinking to, not that you were always like that,
but as far as the church was concerned, it was like very black and white.
To the other side, like that's going to destroy you and your family. So, but I mean, if I'm being honest, there was part of me, it's like, hey, like, can we talk now? But you know, I was trying to be respectful and look at the bigger picture. And
so Chris, you were ambivalent, excited to have kind of a potential ally, someone to
I'm not going to lie, like absolutely.
But also not wanting to see his life blow up.
That's right. But I remember you sharing at times with me, like it's been hard for years. I've been the only one, you know, I've been shouldering this all by myself.
Yeah. And then the mission stuff kicks in a bit too, because it's like these two return missionaries that marry into the family. And I'm like, like I'm like the bad one. So, and no one said that, right? But I just like, so I was like, wait, but there might be another one of us that can at least like between the two of us validate each other and just feel like we're not alone. So
I have a question for you really quick, Mitch, about so 10 p.m. till 3 a.m.
All night, yep.
So who you are when you start at 10 p.m. is quite different than 3 a.m. and that's quite a quick kind of. Can you describe like what that journey was like in those 5 hours and a bit of what it felt like coping with, you know?
Yeah. So for the weeks previous to that, you know, I was a believer. I was trying to make it work. I was learning things that were upsetting, but I still fundamentally believed that the church was true, that there was some way to rationalize or work things out. And then overnight, you know, everything that I had known for the last, you know, at that point, 26, 27 years, everything I had built my life on, everything I built my marriage on, shattered, in a matter of hours. And it was really scary, and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know if I should tell my wife, if I should pretend like everything was fine. A lot of fear went through my mind. Will my wife want to be with me? Am I going to lose my marriage? I have 2 kids at this point. I love the life we built together. But what do I do? I didn't know. I just was very unsure, very scared, to talk to my wife. And, that's what I was most scared of, was potentially losing that relationship, because, you just never know what the other person's feeling or where they're at.
Yeah. And what I was also going to say is, so Chris, you're ambivalent at this point, but it sounds like Mitch leapfrogs you in like a couple days and just completely skips the
That's
progressive
right.
Mormon part.
Yeah.
And just starts going towards the exit.
Yeah.
Well, you're like,
Exactly.
whoa, slow down, bro, slow down.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I was like, pump the brakes, like, because that was my experience. Like, maybe it's not as bad if you slow this down, but it just kind of came out. So how do you put it back at that point? So I tried to be like, send the memes, man, do all the things, send them to me. We were at like these big family things for a couple days, and like, it was therapeutic, right? For you to
joke and laugh and just try to find a way. But I mean, the next day in the evening, I think I waited a day. I went to work and came home, if I'm remembering right. But at some point in the next day and a half, I sat down with my wife, and I shared, Becca, this is kind of what I learned. This is kind of what I've went through in the last week and a half. And this is where I'm at now. And I think it was a pretty big shock to her. I'm not sure she really knew where I was at up until that point. And I think if I was reading her right, her fear was more that now that I was wanting to leave the church, I would leave her as well. And less of, I don't want you now that you've left the church. And so, she was, I thought she did a great job. She listened, very affirming. She was still very believing, but also very reassuring, like, I still want to be with you. And I hope I was with her as well. And so that did take away a huge portion of the fear and the anxiety I was feeling about the process.
So she said, what, I love you no matter what, or what?
Yeah, she was basically like, I love you no matter what. I want to be with you. I love our life. I love, our kids. If I chose to marry you, I still love you. And that was very touching to know, that she still wanted me, that she still loved me. Even if my beliefs had changed. And then I wasn't going to lose that relationship, my best friend, and everything that would come with that. So that was a huge relief.
And I can't probably overemphasize how rare that is in Mormonism, to have just an understanding spouse that's like, hey, I love you no matter what. I'm not trying to trivialize.
Oh, not at all. And I think she did go through a lot of periods where she was like, existential crisis. We built our whole marriage on this. This has been the whole plan. She's very much of a planner. Like, what's the plan now? But it was never like I need to leave you to keep with the plan. It was like, where do we go from here? Like, how does this work?
Still a team.
Yeah, very much so.
The other thing you guys skipped is the tension of believing, well, maybe you didn't skip it, but what I relate to is this tension of believing family members sort of like going, wait a minute, two of these dudes are not on plan. And then whenever there's a family get together, there's like,
story.
like, what are they talking about? And like,
Yeah, we can talk about it. I think it's a good, funny one to
because
share.
it was close to when this happened.
It was pretty quick after this.
Yeah.
I listened to all your President Benson Mormon Stories episodes.
And we start sharing stuff, right?
Yes.
And
so we were talking kind of openly at the dinner table one night about, and we kind of had most of the extended family was there. Anyway.
And?
Well, I think at the moment it was just you, I, and our mother-in-law. and everyone else was watching TV on the couch, and we were talking about some feminist stuff, and I can't remember the exact topic, and I want you to tell me your perspective, because my perspective, like you were like raising your voice, like objectively raising your voice.
I think I was just getting excited, but we were talking about like, women don't have the priesthood and how women might feel, like they don't have a say in the church. Cause these were a lot of things my wife had voiced to me over the years, but I didn't really like fully embrace until I was like now seeing everything through a new light. And my mother-in-law is very nuanced, member of the church, but she was like, I don't really need the priesthood. I don't really want it. And I kind of pushed back, and I think maybe I was getting pretty excited. I was like, but you should have the option one way or the other. Like if you don't want it, that's fine. Right. But like women in general should be able to, be in leadership positions, make choices. Like even if you personally don't want that. But I think I was getting kind of loud.
Well, you were kind of finding your voice, right? And I'm thinking like, oh no, we can like push back in a gentle way, right? And I remember like, so we're back here, and you're just starting to see like heads turn because, oh, that's not Chris talking, like that's Mitch.
Yeah.
Like what? And then it was like,
this was like days after losing
you're kind of out, dude, because now everyone's gonna be talking. They're gonna go to their rooms and be like, "What's going on with Mitch?" And I'm like, and now I'm gonna get pulled in. And be like, "It's him. Like he's toxic, right?" So we're like, well, I think that might have done it. And I remember texting our mother-in-law later, a couple days later, being like, "Hey, like I'm sorry. Like I feel like we were ganging up on you." And she's like, "No, I don't think that way at all." And then I accidentally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a comedy of errors. I accidentally sent her like
the Gretchen Day episode
because I was like really cherry picking.
Were you trying to send it to me or
like
someone else?
Faithful episodes, and I start like, well, maybe I'll try this one. Like we'll see. And so I'm starting to send him one, and I accidentally Mitch, bloop. It goes to Margaret. I was like, oh, well, lean into it. So I'm like, this might give you a perspective of where I am. And it just kind of let it all out. And I was like, which was probably for the best. And I said, here's sort of where I am. I don't want you to be worried about us, about Liz and the kids. And like, I don't believe this or this anymore. I'm not out of the church. I'm kind of trying to figure this out, but like, I won't talk about Mitch's story. But so it kind of probably was healthy in a way to like accidentally send that text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Margi, are you vibing with this or dying to say something? Or?
Oh no, just
okay.
in it. Yeah.
And I think not shortly after that too, our mother-in-law, they live in Saratoga Springs. Chris is in Ephraim, I'm in Magna, but we spend a lot of time at our in-laws' house with our families. One night it's like 11 o'clock and our mother-in-law kind of pulls us aside and we're chatting. And she expresses to us like, I know you guys have different views now. I still want to be a part of your lives and a part of your kids' lives. Like, how can this work? Like she was like, just like very concerned that this might kind of break up the family dynamic. Like she wasn't like, it wasn't concerned like that we had left the church and maybe she was feeling that, I don't know.
And it wasn't like a condition. Like,
no,
here's how it goes.
No,
it was just seeking to understand.
It was more like, hey, I don't want to offend you guys. I still want to be a part of your kids' life. Like, how can I, I don't know if that makes sense.
Sounds direct.
And we talked for like several hours and it was a great conversation. We talked till 2 a.m.
And
she was sharing how she felt and we kind of shared as well.
And it was good to illustrate, like even you and I didn't agree on certain things.
Oh, that's right.
And we showed that. Like I was like, and I'm not in the same space with Mitch on that.
Yeah.
Right. So try to sort of keep it nuanced. And we were asking her questions like without, trying to explain yourself, Yeah. And so that's one thing we wanted to talk about is like my parents have been pretty good. They're runs in the family, but it's sometimes don't talk about things. That might be the best policy. But I told my parents, I don't know, a year ago in September, kind of where I was. And like you helped me. So like, I feel like we were kind of doing the lift each other up a bit, where I felt very confident to like, you know what, I'm going to start revisiting some of these history things that I didn't think about for 10 years because apologetics was great. Let's read some responses and then let's put everything together. And I hadn't really done that. And I'm like, whoa, you talk about this on the LDS discussions episodes a lot, but like this thing works here, but like actually directly contradicts that thing, right? And there's all these disparate pieces and ways of making it work, or it's this and it solves all of it, right? Not to oversimplify it because it does get complicated, but
because you get answers for things in isolation, but when you take the full context and all the items together, it can be a different picture.
I remember part of that conversation though with Margaret. She was like, you guys are drinking coffee now. Should I bring a coffee pot into my house so you guys can have it?
And we're like, no,
like very accommodating.
Like you don't need to do that.
She was like, I'm not comfortable with alcohol. I don't know if you had drank by then. I didn't drink, but but very accommodating. And we kind of came to the conclusion, like at your house, you do it your way, and we'll pray and do all the stuff.
Like we respect like your thing,
our house,
right?
we'll do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have like data on this, but like Margie keeps making faces at me. Anecdotally, it sounds like you have the mother-in-law of the century.
That's right. Yeah, I would say so.
Such a rare.
Because so I mean, and she's a good role model. Like we need to have her on Mormon Stories. Can we have your mother-in-law Mormon Stories?
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Because so many people have like the in-laws are stressed and angry, and they start to tag you as a threat, and they start to exclude people, the non-believers, from the family texts, and they start to like. It can even get as bad as encouraging their believing children to like divorce the non-believing partners, and it can fracture families so that like people aren't invited to family dinners anymore or family vacations, and people get excluded. That's actually more common in my experience, way more common than yours. Almost sounds idyllic. Were you
think
feeling
so.
that way too, Margie?
Does.
Yeah, I thought just her move to not only ask the question directly and to acknowledge a new reality, you feel seen. We're going to just acknowledge what's here. And then to ask a sincere question that shows an openness enough that you have this conversation through the night.
Should I get a coffee maker?
I mean,
said no believing Mormon mom ever.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm exaggerating because there's always a bell curve.
Sure.
I'm just going to say she's 99th percentile.
Yeah.
Oh,
She
It's
still gets on my
beautiful.
case at my house. She makes me put the crack pipe away, but like generally she's pretty good. And I don't want to omit our father-in-law too. Like we don't confront it directly as much. I don't think that's his
He's a little more
personality.
still, I think, a literal believer. Maybe not as nuanced.
Yeah.
But he has not, said one thing negative to us. We still talk sports. He's a temple worker, and he missed his templeship to come to our daughter's birthday party, which was very meaningful to us. So still, we're still very much involved, and, he'll ask about things. And
Yeah, and I think we acknowledge that it's painful. Like it's not just us. Like,
Sure.
hey, validate
Yeah,
us, I've been quiet for so long. Talk to me about this and listen to me. But it's painful for family. It's painful for my parents. I mean, I put this off. I feel guilty because I'm like, I've talked to my in-laws before my own parents about this because it's going to hurt my mom. I mean, she's going to internalize all this and be like, it's me, I did this, which is none of that's true. They were a positive influence and did what they should have. And I had a good experience, so it's hard to have these conversations. So it's amazing to have family that actually engage, and it's fun. I actually enjoy talking about this stuff with family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so happy for your family. I'm happy to provide your in-laws as positive role models. And I'm feeling the pain of all my listeners that are like,
oh, totally.
It's been hell from that day forward. That's, but I think it gives hope. It gives acknowledgement that there are good, reasonable, believing Mormon people. And I shouldn't act like that's rare, but it's my experience. But it should give people hope and hopefully provide a role model. If believing Mormons are watching, and we know they are, do what their mother-in-law did.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, like
Do that.
even
Totally.
recently. So we recently had a new baby, our third, and our mother-in-law and father-in-law are going to watch our kids. And I didn't have this conversation directly, but my wife shared a conversation with her mom, and her mom was like, "Hey, what if we have them on a Sunday? What do you want us to do? Like, we still want to worship, but like, we don't want to necessarily take your kids to church if you're not okay with it." So that kind of means a lot. Like they're actively reaching out, and I hope we are too, to respect their their wishes. And
Love
stuff.
it. I want to have your mother-in-law on Mormon Stories if she'll come. I really do. You guys are just no way.
Maybe.
Yeah.
how to treat your non-believing family and friends. Bye.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that would be a fun series. Oh, yeah.
If any of you, if their mother-in-law won't come on, if any of you are watching and you have an in-law or a parent who's been super good about your faith crisis, reach out to me.
Yeah.
And if they'll come on Mormon Stories, Margi and I will do that episode. Right, Margi?
We will, and we will treat them so well.
As good as we treated Patrick Mason or better. How's that? Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and it's genetic because our spouses have been amazing.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So, yeah.
So are you guys wanting or able to talk about where your spouses are belief-wise?
Yeah,
Or
I
do
can
you
talk a
wanna
bit about
not-
that.
Okay.
I checked.
Yeah,
before I
we
came
asked
on.
them both.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess one other thing that was very important to me was after I left, we spent some time with a brother and sister-in-law, kind of in between both of us. And, you know, we do a lot of sports together, and we were in the car on our way, you know, to go shooting. And he was like, hey, can I chat with you? And I was like, oh, no, like he's going to, you know, what's going to happen? And he was like, hey, I noticed you said a couple things earlier, you know, that were negative on the church. And I think he maybe knew that I was leaving at that point, but he's like, I don't really care. I just want to be your friend. And that meant a lot to me. And he was genuine as well. So that meant a lot. But as far as where my spouse is, she continued, you know, for the last year that I've been out of the church to go to church, very much involved. She was, you know, led the singing time. For a while, she would kind of take our kids every other Sunday. You know, as time has gone on, I think me stepping away and her continuing to go to church, she's noticed more things that bug her at church. Until, you know, maybe a couple months ago, we were chatting and she was like, I think when I have this baby, I want to take kind of a maternity leave from the church and decide if, you know, I still, you know, want to be associated with the church, what my level of, you know, commitment was. For the, you know, several months before having the baby, she was just going only to the hour of Sunday school because sacrament meeting became triggering to her. And she then finally asked to be released, I think in part due to just because she was very pregnant and it was uncomfortable for her to be standing and teaching singing time. But I don't think our kids have been to church in the last 6 months. You know, she has shared a lot about this pregnancy has been really nice because she doesn't feel like she has to wear garments and she can kind of wear things that feel comfortable as a pregnant woman. And, you know, she tried coffee kind of when I did just to taste it. And she was like, I hate this. But like ever since giving birth, she's been asking me to make her lattes. And every day she's like, it could do with less sweetener. It could have more coffee in it, which is totally opposite from where she's been. So I'm like, yeah, who is this lady? Anyway.
Lattes are the one true beverage.
Yeah, that's right. I testify.
Yeah.
Unless you're a believer, and then that's totally okay.
Yep.
No pressure.
Yeah. So my wife is currently the primary president, and she just loves working with kids, and that I think helps with some of her concerns. I would describe her as very nuanced and nuancing more, and we've had really open, good communication since, you know, we sort of started connecting. It's been so good. You know, like my middle, Clara, will be 8 next month. And so we had a year to kind of, what are we going to do with the baptism? What do we do with this?
That's a big one for people. Yep.
And so we've been able to, our kids are young enough. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a almost 5-year-old, where we can, how do we map this out? And so, you know, we've tried to have these conversations. Well, what do we do on Sundays? And it's a moving target, but we've found a lot of good common ground. They decide what they want to do every week. Initially it was, well, can we have them be doing something like churchy? And I was like, sure. And I was like, well, I don't know why. Like, how come they can be learning about like purity culture at church, and that's like somehow better than me playing a video game with them at home. And she's like, yeah, okay. I guess let's try to keep it even, and let's actually respect agency and choice, and we'll give them choice. So she's been super good, and we've been trying to meet up on how to do that with the kids, and it's really lucky. She's been amazing with this, and I know it's been hard, and it's easier. It's easier the more, we line up on things. And we've been agreeing with, again, things with the kids. How do we want to raise them? How do we want to do this? And she's also been much more vocal in like ward council and found her voice, which is awesome. So yeah, I don't know if we want to get into the disciplinary council stuff. She went to bat for me.
Whoa. So
yeah, this kind of new.
Okay.
I don't know if I put this in the outline for you to see, but I guess it is part of the question, like how she's doing with this, because we've been talking about someone's going to talk to you eventually about me. So you don't have to say anything for me. You can if you want. So we would kind of just go through scenarios, and she came home. It was like,
well, you made a TikTok channel, right?
Oh yeah. So I
started posting some funny videos.
It was like a year ago.
Some humor.
They're just stupid memes, right? They're just funny. And they're like PG-13, like for like Exmo stuff. And,
what's your channel called?
I knew this.
Or do you not want to share?
I don't know actually.
Okay.
Cause I might just delete it.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it was very therapeutic, and we would send them back and forth.
Yeah.
We would laugh about it. I've got like 1,800 followers, like nothing, right? And so she comes home. She's like 2 hours in a disciplinary, or 2 hours in a ward council. I was like, you were gone a long time. She's like, the thing that you said was going to happen, meaning the bishop's going to ask me about you. It did. But it's like way worse than we thought. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Because of the TikToks, right?
Yeah. So
someone had seen it.
Someone saw like a TikTok you made, which I think it's just a funny, like, rock in a hat joke that's very self-deprecating to me. Someone saw it and then said something to the bishop. Like, isn't this guy in your ward? And he's like, yeah. And then I don't know how this all started. I'm like maybe a little suspicious that that's how it happened, but because TikTok, you have to kind of look for things. They don't just pop up. Anyway, and I like my bishop. He's a good guy. And I doubt he really wanted to be giving this information to Liz.
Unless TikTok's algorithm has GPS built into it, and they're serving TikToks.
I don't know.
For people interested in Mormonism who live close to them. That's
Maybe.
possible.
Yeah.
It could be, I don't know. But it went up to the stake president, and he was just like, do you know what a disciplinary council is? She's like, yeah, what? So it's because of this TikTok. And
so they're talking to your wife about a disciplinary council for you.
For you?
Yep.
Because you kept your records in, right? I got mine removed.
Yeah, I'm still a member.
Yeah.
Margi's making a face. Why, Margi?
Interesting.
That's what I thought.
What?
The same face and the interesting reaction. It's like, well, So I said, I'm sorry, like that happened to you. Like you're in the middle of this, and I got a little upset. Like I've heard from nobody for like a year. No elders quorum presence. Like, hey, where you been? Which okay, I actually like that. It's respect that and let me do my thing. But I'm like, now they're going to go through you. So it did kind of bother me a bit. And he, and I'm going to quote, like, this is the what he said. Like, and I think he was relaying this from the stake president. Like, we need to protect the good name of the church. And I'm like, like you hear that's a phrase, but like to say it like that. Right. And I think that kind of bugged her. Like, oh, so it's like, that's what it's about, and nothing has happened. This was in July, and I was kind of gearing up for this because he basically said if he doesn't stop making these, like it's probably going to happen. So I think he was trying to just give her a heads up, so it wasn't like two people show up to your door and hand you a summons or whatever they do. But she kind of went to bat for me, and said, yeah, like he shows me his TikToks. He thinks they're hilarious, and sometimes I think they're funny. His oldest helped him make the one that you're talking about, and she said she had to actually explain like the joke, like, the rock and the hat. He's like, and I don't know if he doesn't know that or just doesn't get the humor or whatever, but like she had to explain it, and it just made it this awkward interaction, So, and I love this, and I think she's okay with me saying this, but at one point, she said, I do not believe in a God who would separate a family eternally for a TikTok like that. And I think that's probably why nothing's happened yet, because they didn't anticipate that response. Who knows? This might change things, but
you mean this interview?
Yeah, we'll see. But I wonder if taking the message further up was like, this might not be the best idea. It's just going to do more damage, And we thought about it. What do I do if this happens? Do I ignore it? Because do I care? No. Like, I'm still a member. Do I care if they ruin my name? Like, I guess no. But yeah, I just was waiting and planning, and I decided no, I am going to go in. If it happens, I will go in, and I kind of have a reason for going in and kind of explaining the scenario and being nice about it and everything. But it's also very awkward because there's people on my council that I work with at Snow. It's like, do you recuse yourself? Like, how does this work? And it puts them in a weird spot. I feel bad for them too, but I mean, I don't know. It's like, am I revealing my strategy here? But maybe it's good for people to know if they're thinking about it. They have the right to do it and everything, I guess. My goal would be just own it. I mean, if you're doing this for a TikTok, own it and like sign this or let me record it, because we live in a small town and I'm not putting my family through that. Because if you label it apostasy, like no one's going to be like, oh, he probably made like an innocuous, semi-funny TikTok that makes fun of himself in a rock and a hat.
They're going to think you've taken on a plural wife.
Yeah, I mean, it's down in Manti, right? Like,
yeah.
I gotta have fun with that. But anyway, yeah, I can't do that. Like, are they thinking about what that's going to do to my family who still goes to church? So I just want, like, just sign here. This is why this is happening. It's for this TikTok, and then we'll be good. And I've been showing the TikTok to like active believing. Like, I have a friend in a bishopric. I've got
secretary guy.
That's friend. A different person.
Different friend.
But I'll show people. And they're like, "Oh, that's hilarious," and they're like active members. I'm like, "Yeah, should you excommunicate someone for that?" They're like, "What?" I told my mom this last night. She's like, "How is that any of their business?" Right? So I don't know what's going on down there, but
this is where again?
It's in Ephraim.
Ephraim. Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean, they say there's Bishop Roulette, but there's, if like you're in president? Cambridge, or Berkeley or Manhattan
not a problem.
Or Brooklyn, it's going to be very different than Ephraim.
Yep.
Or
totally.
even Salt Lake City versus like Cache Valley or Provo or Rigby.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so, and she even said, like, if you do, I'll be your witness, because like they just don't know any of your story. They don't know that between Facebook and Instagram, you don't do any of this stuff on those platforms, but you tell the algorithms to only go to people like you on TikTok because it's therapeutic. You're not allowed to feel validated at all. We get to do it every Sunday, but you can't do it through this closed little channel of TikTok with like a measly 1,000 followers. Right. And so I think it started to frustrate her a little bit more the more she thought about, like, they just don't know anything about you. So that's a ongoing thing, I guess.
Although, let's not minimize TikTok, because you can have 1,000 followers, but you can have one video get 100,000 views. And it's like,
well, and that one
like
did
TikTok,
get like the most I've ever had, which is like, well, it was medium. It was like 30,000 something views.
Just think about that. Like with the creation that creates a few minutes to create, let's just say 30 minutes at the most, you're reaching 30,000 people with something so easily consumable. Mm-hmm. I mean, TikTok could be conceived as kryptonite for the Mormon Church.
So John is definitely siding, I think, with your bishop.
I was like, they're like taking notes.
So
like, all right, this guy's out.
John's
Take him out.
Appear and just maybe offer.
He's like, I don't want to be blamed for this. You come on this podcast and this is what does it.
That's not what I'm trying to do, but I'm just trying to acknowledge that the church. I know.
Yeah.
But the church is in a world of hurt with TikTok.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because a post-Mormon TikToker can do one video and 1 million people see it. How do you reach 1 million people in
right?
Go 10, 20 years ago, no random Joe or Jane could reach a million people with a 5-minute, 10-minute creation. With TikTok, you can.
That's right.
Yeah. And if they're thinking about it like that,
stake president for Chris, leave him alone. Leave him alone. It'll hurt you way more than it'll hurt him. I promise. And it'll hurt his kids and his wife, and they don't deserve to be hurt. So freaking stake president, take it from me. They excommunicated me. It's been a disaster for the church and my family in many ways. Don't do it. Walk away. Put it down. Put the gun down. Leave him alone.
There we go. Damage control, right? And if they view it like the way you are, then I totally understand. But I make content for people like Mitch and people who have already like left. That's all it is, right? And so it's very narrow part of my life, right? It's just these fun little things. So, it's odd, and I don't know my stake president actually. I'm sure he's a good dude, I just don't know who he is. So we'll see. But all this is to say that Liz has been like, it could have been so much worse, right? I mean, like you stop or I'm out, and all the stuff we've talked about. So our wives have been amazing with all of this, super understanding. We're lucky, really lucky, because a lot of people do not have that, and it's hard to keep it in.
Well, Margi's been really good about making sure that we don't give short shrift to the reconstruction part of our interviews. So Margi, I hate to say it, we got about 15 minutes before I have to go run to a thing, but why don't you take over and let's do some reconstruction.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me on the spot think of a question about rebuilding.
You want me to jump in?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
What would you ask?
Okay, so it sounds like probably the biggest issue for people is reconstructing or salvaging or just grieving relationships with believing family and friends. And it sounds like neither of you are really put over the rack about believing family and friends. You've got pretty good relationships with your believing family and friends, which is pretty good, right?
I'd say for the most part, I don't have any contact with my immediate family. It's been a couple of years for other reasons that we don't really need to get into. And I really haven't came out, I guess, to any family on my side.
That's called healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
With people that may not,
that's right.
It may not be constructive to share with them.
But I do have good relationships with still people on my side of the family. My grandmother has kind of been like a second mom to me, but I still haven't really come out as leaving the church to those people. But everyone on our side of the family, pretty good relationships.
And that's totally valid to just decide you're not going to disclose because it wouldn't help them or it wouldn't help you or it wouldn't help the relationship. How about, and then the probably the companion issue is reconstructing your marriages now that they're built on different things. It sounds like you're both in pretty good places with your spouses. Anything you want to say in addition about because in the one case you got a mixed faith marriage, you do, Chris. Mitch, on the other hand, the foundation of your marriage has been kind of wiped away.
That's right.
If the foundation was the church. Is there anything you guys want to say about rebuilding the marriage?
I would say from my standpoint, it was pretty quick after I decided to leave the church that I decided I didn't necessarily find evidence for a higher power. I did a lot of reading, on evolution and on biology and on the age of the earth and things like that. And so, regardless of maybe my wife's trending to not as a literal believer in the church, there has still been a riff on, she does believe in a higher power and I don't really, believe that. And so kind of as the church was wiped away, we've had to do a lot of work and we've really talked a lot more than we ever have in our marriage before to just figure out who we are. Like, what does she like? What do I like? What does she believe? What do I believe? And we've really become very close in just kind of working through the muddiness of, what do we want our life to be like now that there's not this, covenant path checklist. And it's been very beautiful. I feel like I've been able to be vulnerable with her and share my fears and share kind of hurts, and she's been able to share. And, we don't believe the same things, but we really love each other. And I think a lot of the values that we still have are the same. I still value my relationship with my wife and our marriage. I love my kids and I love spending time with them and being a dad. You know, I still have a career that I care about. And I guess just trying to rebuild that together, you know, after it's been taken apart has been really hard, but it's also been beautiful because I feel like I know my wife in a deeper way that I hadn't before. And I feel like I've been able to open up and share a part of me that I wasn't able to share before.
That's beautiful.
I love that. Yep.
I sometimes have said that a faith crisis doesn't ruin a marriage. It doesn't save a marriage. It can just reveal a marriage.
That's right.
And it sounds like for you,
like that.
Mitch, faith crisis has allowed you to strengthen your marriage.
Yeah, it has.
And even get to a better place than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great outcome. How about for you, Chris?
Yeah, and I'm trying to even think of, like, do I apply the faith crisis label to me? And I don't know if I do, because it was so slow. But acknowledging, you know, I'm, I guess, a non-believing, non-practicing Mormon, but I still love reading about Mormonism in different ways. So we are in different spaces, but I kind of agree. And to add to that, it's been really fun, kind of, and invigorating and just very positive to view this as an opportunity, especially for our kids, because we're sort of leaning into, like, let's say that one of our kids has a question at the dinner table. This has happened too. And instead of we don't talk about that here, or that's anti, or, you know, whatever. These are kind of cliche tropes, but it's, well, here's what your mom thinks, right? And we disagree. So then I'll tell you kind of what I think, and we'll both say that we don't know, and it's okay not to know, and just model that, like, multiple perspectives.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. So there's not one or two or three. It's, you know, and then acknowledging we're limited in different beliefs and views on certain things. So, and we don't agree, but, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's fine. And I'm hoping that that'll equip them intellectually, emotionally, to encounter things and be able to navigate those things without having meltdowns or getting defensive or having cognitive, all those problems that can result from these issues with faith and, you know, the whole thing. So, and if they decide, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go on a mission, I'm going to do that, like, you'll be better for it because you'll actually have been exposed to, like, my perspective growing up. So good, right? I'm hoping it's not as, like, fragile, or does that make sense? So viewing it as a positive thing for our kids. And we've already started this. My daughter, a couple weeks ago, we were at a little coffee shop. She asked me, Dad, is Satan real? You know, and I'm thinking, like, what do I say to that? Because I want to be like, no, I don't think so. But I want to give her options. So I'm like, well, here's what, like, our church says and believes, and, you know, there's this option and there's this option. Here's what I think. So I gave my opinion, but sort of more as an option, and said, but the fun part is you get to pick and no one gets to tell you. And I might, like, make my case to you and try to persuade you and give you reasons as to why I think it might be problematic to constantly think someone's looking over your shoulder to regulate your behavior. And she's all like, Santa? I was like, yeah, you're already getting this. But I feel like I'm not ashamed of that. Like, I am giving my children options and trying to even acknowledge the limitations in my own views and letting them choose. So I think that's been a positive thing. And I don't know if I would have done that even, like, 4 or 5 years ago. Would have been just keep them here, like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love so much about that. Because what I hear is kind of asking them questions that they get to kind of decide for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of conversation and discussion, as opposed to highly controlled environments where you have the answers and you're kind of telling them what to. I'm hearing just a lot of connection, exploration, and even embodying kind of differentiation and love. So they don't have to fear that by being different or by holding a different opinion or belief that they won't be loved.
Yeah. And rewarding them for asking a question like that, like, oh, this is fun, let's talk about this, instead of kind of punishing them. I think a lot of parents do that unintentionally.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of like activist families that are really good at this, right? So I'm not saying that I hold a monopoly on like good parenting, teaching your kids how to critically think, but yeah. So that's been a really, really fun kind of positive thing. It's exciting.
Love it.
All right, my rebuilding questions came to me. So one question I have is, oftentimes amidst transition, certain areas of life are impacted, right? So you've mentioned some. Parenting can be one, marriage, identity oftentimes is another one, existential, the existential kind of those bigger questions. One question I have for you is, has there been a particular area for each of you that has been harder to rebuild or explore, or if we're kind of looking at it in those terms of areas that kind of get deeply impacted as we change or undergo a major transition in life?
You thinking of anything?
You want to go first? Or?
That's a good question. So I don't know where I stand on a deity. I'm more and more kind of disinclined to believe in a Christian anthropomorphic kind of God. Maybe I don't know. I'm open to that, but sometimes it's hard to, if I'm struggling with something and I'm alone, to be like, oh, I don't know if I can just like talk to a deity and just like vent or ask for something. So reframing that is like, we'll just think about it on your own and reflect and talk to yourself. Like that can be hard.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's been, finding a purpose. When I was very believing, you have a very strong purpose of, you want to be eternally saved with your family, and you believe that's going to be a reality. And then when that comes crashing down, and really also with that, a belief in, maybe a God at all, it's hard to figure out, well, now what? Like, why am I here? Like, what is my purpose? And so that's taken a long time to kind of work through, and I don't know if I'm 100% there. But kind of what I've come to, I guess, is, what I view as my purpose now is to, enjoy every day, to be present with my family, to enjoy time with them, to enjoy my relationships, and just kind of live in the present. And that's what I have. And that's what I, tomorrow's not guaranteed. And, so just coming to that, kind of leaving the despair of, we're on a floating rock that sparked life billions of years ago, and now I'm here, but just enjoying what I do have, and really trying to just love my wife and kids and just live every day. And anyway,
have you found more meaning in things that you didn't really think about before, or like even just enjoyment, right?
Yeah, I think I feel more present because I feel like tomorrow's not guaranteed. There's no eternity promised to me to be with my family. I've been trying to take off a little more time from work to be with my family, things like that, trying to be a little more focused on
just like the
enjoying the now. Not that I don't plan for the future. I still have a job. We still save. Anyway.
Yeah. I so hear that. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking too, like, there are times when, like a new song will show up in my iTunes or something, and I'm like, oh, let's check this out, or a book. And I have found more enjoyment that someone like made this thing on their own for the benefit of other humans.
That's right.
And I get it. They're getting paid and stuff, but with art and literature and I already appreciate those things. It's a huge part of my career, but on a weirdly deeper level that, like maybe we don't give God all the credit for like everything good that we have because people put in work, you know, and like scientists did a lot of work, and maybe I can appreciate this more because we have somehow like figured out how to make this work so far, like potentially without any guidance. And there's something beautiful about that. Right. So I have been able to find moments of like, I'm actually appreciating this song with more, you know, enjoyment than I might have otherwise.
And even I remember just driving home from work after I lost my faith and looking at the person in the car next to me and no longer feeling like the hostility of, oh, that person might have a tattoo, or, oh, they might drink coffee, but just thinking, you know, they're just like me on this little rock living their life. And I don't know, like feeling a love for everyone. Or just like, I don't know, not feeling a boundary there and just
conditions.
Like, hey, they're just like me, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is another positive with our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's such a relief that there are certain things that aren't going to be deal breakers for my children, you know?
Yeah. That makes so much sense. You know, for each of you in thinking about this internal process change, has it been kind of on your own, or have there been resources, thinking of books, podcasts, practices, whatever it will be, that for you have been particularly, they could be comforting things, they could be formative to new thoughts. Do you have anything in particular that sticks out?
I think for me, there have been several things that have been helpful. I really look forward to spending time with family. You know, just even calling or chatting with Chris has been helpful for me to have someone else who's kind of going through it or gone through it. Podcasts were really helpful, especially at the beginning. I think I consumed more. I still do listen to some podcasts, but it's not every day as frequent as it was when I was just kind of in the depths of, where am I at? You know, John's podcast, this podcast, Bill Reel and RFM's podcast was helpful. Meditation has been really helpful for me. That's a practice that, just kind of mindfulness has really helped me just connect to myself and to the present. That's been very impactful. And then my wife's been very supportive and open to talk and listen. And I think those are a couple things.
Yeah, brilliant.
I mean, similar with me, but it's relationships with other people. I have really good friends now. I always have, but especially just moving into an area. We've been there about 3 years in Ephraim. I made really good friends. And it's nice to just why do I need a lot more than this? You know, I love my job. You know, I have an amazing family. This is just enjoying. I know it's just cliche. We're not saying anything new here, but like enjoying simple things that I might not have otherwise enjoyed because I was focused on these other things I was supposed to be doing. So, and I'm lucky in that I think I can open a book and sit on my porch and have like a Coke and just be like, this is like a very enjoyable experience. Why do I need more than this? You know? So I'm gonna say that's like my new religion or something, but I've been able to enjoy more of those things and I guess give myself permission to do that. Like you shouldn't feel guilty. Like you're not wasting time. And that can be hard for people. Like, oh, I'm playing this video game with my kids and they're watching me and we're laughing and this is why do I feel like, no, we need to get off this and we need to go do this other thing. And so it helps for me. It's helped to sort of abandon a lot of the kind of rat race stuff and of course, like that was my experience, with the whole mission thing. Like, keep going. Okay, I have kids, keep going. Now you got other people to worry about, so you got to do more, and giving myself permission to just enjoy this. Let's travel more. Let's go do more things. We live in Utah. There's so many things you can do that are an hour from my house. So, yeah. So I don't have a silver bullet, but like those things have helped me.
I love that. I love that shift away from I mean, we could call it a lot of things. We could call it, like, culturally, it's hustle, you know, and then religion wise, it's almost like this sense of endure, like duty, endure, all that to enjoy. And that's a big, beautiful shift in how you kind of engage life and engage each moment. All right, one final, you kind of answered this, but I'm kind of curious if there's anything else you want to add. You know, on some level, who you are now may not be something that you planned for. Like if you had told yourself your 16-year-old selves or your 18-year-old selves you'd be here, that this would be your life. What surprises you about being here? What does it feel like to be you in this moment now?
I think kind of when we were in the married ward, we saw a lot of couples leave the church. And we'd tell ourselves in our marriage, like, hey, if we just keep going to church, this will never be us. We just keep believing. And now, now it is. I think what would really surprise myself back then is that, I genuinely feel like I'm a good person. I'm not perfect. I don't think anybody is. But, I'm taking care of my kids. I'm going to work. I'm, supporting my wife. I'm, enjoying life. Like, like nothing has devastatingly gone wrong in my life. I'm not some terrible person like I thought I might have been without the church. And, I think I would be surprised to learn that a lot of the goodness that I had in my life before was from me and not from some, like Holy Ghost or higher power making me good. And then everything bad was me. Like I was the combination of, the positives and negatives. And just to learn that, I'm doing okay and I'm happy and I'm enjoying life. And yeah. I think that's what I would say.
You're not hustling for worthiness or love.
Yeah. And I don't need to. I'm beautiful the way I am. I deserve love. I'm at heart a good person, with or without the church.
Yeah. And there's joy.
There's lots of joy. There is. We just welcomed a new baby into the world a couple of days ago. And just how beautiful that was, anyway.
And just from my point of view, like, I'm like, oh, this is Mitch. This is who you are. Like, who knew that you had an amazing sense of humor? Like, I didn't. Like you were. It feels like you were kind of limited before, and it's beyond just that. But how it's your actual self. I feel like from my perspective, having known you coming into the family. So just I can confirm that, like, from my perspective too.
And also for me, like, fully able to, like, embrace you how you are, and not, no bars held, there's not some weird theory you have. It's like actual true history. And, anyway, I've always admired the critical thinking and conversations, but to be able to fully, be there with you.
Yeah. And I'll just say real quick that I just feel like life gets better and better. My marriage has it's the best it's ever been in every possible way. And if my wife was right here sitting here, she would absolutely agree with that. And I'm pretty sure that that's one of the things she told my bishop is like, you do not need to worry about us. We are better than we've ever been. He is.
That's the last thing a bishop wants to hear.
Yeah, I know. Like, well, you don't need me though. Okay.
That's the most threatening thing you can tell a leader.
And we always want to tell bishops what is most comforting for them to hear.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's just better. So yeah, I'm happy. It's great.
Yeah.
Great questions, love. I don't know why I ever ask questions. You should just ask all the questions.
I know you made us think. We were like paused for a minute. Like, oh, how do I?
Anyway. Well, Chris and Mitch, we could have gone slower and taken twice the time, and I still would have felt like it was valuable. We had to compress today into 4 or 5 hours just because we've got a lot of stuff going on. But I almost canceled this morning because I had a tickle. I have a tickle in my throat. But I'm so glad we didn't. I'm sorry it took so long for us to actually schedule this. How long did it take us?
I don't know. We started talking
Like a year?
in like February or March.
But y'all were patient. For those of you who I've promised to do an interview with Mormon Stories, Chris will tell you if you hang in there, it'll happen. Because there's probably like 10,000 people I've said, come on, Mormon Stories.
Right.
And then I never followed up. I'm sorry. Anyway, I am so glad. You both are lovely. You're both wise.
Thanks for having us.
I want to meet your spouses. I want to meet your mother-in-law, maybe your father-in-law. I'm just kidding. Of course, your parents-in-law.
You do.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful for your vulnerability, for your wisdom, for your personalities, and for modeling health and hope and happiness and joy. For those who decide to leave, they can know that there's joy in store for them. Yeah. And I can't thank you enough for speaking up.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. I appreciate it.
It's been a privilege and a blast to be here.
And Chris, the state president,
Yeah, that's right.
One more time.
don't do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it Dikembe Mutombo. Do you recognize that, Mitch? Dikembe?
Yeah, Matumbo.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And Margi, thanks for being co-host.
I'm so glad I
love
was
you.
here. Thank you both for your stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening and
Yeah,
asking
I'm glad
questions.
you were here too.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on Mormon Stories. Please support us at mormonstories.org. Click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. Follow us on all the social medias. Share this with everyone you can. Email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. Be kind to each other. Be good to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Take care.